You've been lied to about gratitude. They told you it's just saying thank you when someone does you a favor, or smiling politely even when you don't mean it. But if that were true, why do so many people who say thank you every day still feel empty inside? Why do you, even with food on the table and a roof over your head, sometimes feel restless, anxious, always waiting for something more before you can finally feel content? The truth is, gratitude isn't about manners. It isn't about pretending everything is fine. Real gratitude is deeper. It's a way of seeing the world, a shift in the heart, a quiet power that turns even ordinary moments into miracles. And Buddhist wisdom holds the blueprint. For centuries, monks, teachers, and seekers have discovered how to be grateful, not only for the good, but also for the fleeting, the painful, the imperfect. They learned how to look at every breath, every step, every sunrise as a gift. Not because life is easy, but because life is precious. Tonight, as you listen, something inside you will soften. The noise in your mind will quiet down. The weight you've been carrying will feel lighter, and your heart will open. You'll feel a kind of peace that doesn't depend on what happens tomorrow, because it's already here inside this moment, inside you. And when you wake up, the world will look different, brighter, kinder, enough. This isn't just another sleep story. This is a doorway to gratitude, to freedom, to a way of living where every day feels like a gift. Are you ready? Let's begin. So far you've opened the door. You've felt the pull of a quieter kind of gratitude, the kind that doesn't depend on what you own or who approves of you, but on how you see the world. Before we move further, let's step into the first lesson. It begins with one of the simplest yet hardest truths to face. Nothing lasts. Every moment, every breath, every relationship, even every thought passing, shifting, gone as quickly as it comes. To some this sounds frightening, but to those who learn to see it clearly, it becomes the source of the deepest appreciation for life. When you understand impermanence, known in Buddhism as anchor, the way you see the world change, you stop treating moments as though they are endless and start treasuring them because they are brief. Think about the last time you heard laughter that warmed your heart. It didn't last forever. It rose, filled the air, and then faded. But wasn't its passing what made it so precious? If it went on forever, you wouldn't notice its sweetness. The truth is, everything gains value because it doesn't last. This teaching is not meant to depress you, but to awaken you. Many people resist change, holding on desperately to what feels good, trying to freeze time. But the harder you grip, the faster it slips away, and the more suffering you create. Gratitude, then, is born when you let go of clinging. You begin to see that the flower in bloom is beautiful precisely because it will wither. The meal tastes divine because it will soon be finished. The people you love are worth cherishing because no moment with them will ever repeat itself. Exactly this is the truth. To practice gratitude through impermanence, you can start by noticing the smallest shifts. The way morning sunlight moves across your wall, changing shade by shade until the room feels different. The warmth of tea in your hands, cooling little by little until the cup is empty. The feeling of being tired, giving way to sleep, and then the miracle of waking again. These are not ordinary events. They are constant reminders that life is always moving, always flowing, and that the joy of today can never be captured again. Gratitude begins the moment you recognize this flow and stop demanding permanence from what is never meant to stay. This understanding also softens the blow of loss. When something or someone leaves your life, the mind often screams, "It should have lasted forever." But impermanence whispers back, "It was never meant to." And within that whisper lies relief. Instead of resenting that it ended, you can feel thankful that it ever began. Even pain becomes lighter when seen in this way. The worst heartbreak, the hardest season, even the sharp edge of grief, all of it will pass. Knowing this doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives you strength to endure it with patience and with gratitude for the lessons hidden inside. Impermanence also teaches you presence, because once you see that everything is fleeting, you naturally want to be awake to it while it is here. You stop rushing through your meals. You stop half listening to conversations. You stop waiting for later to finally live. You learn to pay attention, not because you are forcing yourself to, but because you understand that this very moment will vanish. How can you not treasure it? When you eat, the flavors will never return in exactly the same way. When you hear the rain tonight, tomorrow it will sound different. Even your own emotions are shifting, flowing like waves. Gratitude becomes your natural response, because you know you are standing in the middle of miracles that will never come back once gone. Anicca, the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, also reveals the hidden beauty in endings. Many people fear endings, but Buddhism teaches that without them beginnings would never arrive. The setting sun is not just the close of a day, it is the promise of another dawn. The falling leaf is not just decay, it is the nourishment for new growth. When you train yourself to see endings in this way, gratitude blossoms even in moments of goodbye. You thank the experience, the person, the chapter of your life, not for lasting forever, but for touching you at all. This shift changes the way you live. You stop demanding certainty and instead begin dancing with change. Gratitude, then, is not something you practice only when life feels kind. It becomes your posture toward reality itself. Every new wrinkle on your skin becomes a reminder that you have lived, that time has gifted you experience. Every farewell sharpens your love for those still by your side. Every changing season carries a lesson. Nothing is guaranteed, and that is precisely what makes it worth celebrating. You also begin to let go of comparison. When you understand that life is temporary, you stop wasting it, chasing other people's timelines, or clinging to their approval. You see that your journey is uniquely yours, and the shortness of life makes it foolish to spend it living someone else's script. Gratitude arises as you honor your own unfolding, even when it looks different from what the world expects. Each day becomes enough because you stop measuring it against endless demands for more. And when you connect with this truth deeply, fear begins to fade. Why? Because much of fear is tied to the illusion of permanence. We fear losing what we think should stay forever. We fear endings as if they are unnatural. But when you see impermanence clearly, you realize that change is not an interruption of life, it is life. You can then face uncertainty with a calmer heart, grateful for the chance to experience each stage without expecting it to remain the same. This perspective also changes how you treat people, knowing that nothing lasts. You become kinder, you don't hold grudges as tightly, because you recognize that the chance to love someone may be gone tomorrow. You don't postpone forgiveness because you see how fragile time truly is. Every word of kindness feels urgent. Every hug feels precious. Gratitude for others does not wait for grand occasions. It spills daily gestures, small moments, simple acts. Even your relationship with your own body transforms. Instead of resenting aging or wishing to be different, you begin to appreciate what your body allows you to do right now. Maybe your legs ache, but they still carry you through this day. Maybe your hair has changed, but it carries the years you have survived. Instead of clinging to a past version of yourself, you thank your body for staying with you through every shift, every stage. Living with gratitude for impermanence also strips away boredom. Boredom is the illusion that a moment has no value. But once you see that each moment is passing, boredom cannot exist. Even washing dishes becomes alive when you recognize that this exact arrangement of bubbles, light, and sound will never return. Gratitude wakes you up to the fact that even the simplest action is unrepeatable. And impermanence invites you to meet the unknown with open hands. When you accept that tomorrow will not look like today, you stop resisting the flow of life. Instead, you cultivate curiosity. What gift will the next moment bring? This isn't blind optimism. It is the recognition that even in hardship, impermanence guarantees movement. No storm lasts forever. No joy does either, but that only makes each one sacred. Gratitude grows in both directions. Thankful that pain will pass, and thankful that joy appeared at all. This way of living is not about detachment from life, but about deeper connection to it. It is about leaning in fully, aware that each moment is like a wave rising and falling. You stop asking the waves to freeze, and you stop being shocked when they disappear. Instead, you ride them with presence. You thank them for their rise, and you let them go when they return to the sea. Gratitude becomes the natural rhythm of this ride, and the more you live with this awareness, the lighter your heart becomes. You stop filling your life with clutter, both physical and emotional, because you no longer need to cling. You realize that the value of life is not in how much you accumulate, but in how deeply you experience each fleeting moment. Gratitude, then, is not an effort. It is the only response that makes sense when everything is slipping through your fingers, beautiful precisely because it does not stay. As night falls and you rest, this truth becomes even clearer. Today has ended. You cannot hold it. You cannot return to it. And yet you can be grateful it happened at all. Tomorrow will come, or maybe it will not. Either way, this breath right now is enough. Gratitude arises in knowing that you are Aviv in this fleeting instant, and that is a miracle beyond measure. When you begin to see impermanence clearly, life starts to feel lighter. Gratitude naturally blooms when you stop clinging to moments and allow them to pass with dignity. Yet there is another truth waiting just beneath this one, a truth that is far less comfortable, but equally transformative. While impermanence shows us the fleeting beauty of life, suffering reveals its hidden depths. Most people spend their lives trying to run away from discomfort, numbing it, hiding it, or pretending it does not exist. But suffering, known in Buddhism as dukkha, is not an enemy. It is a teacher, perhaps the most honest one you will ever meet. And if you let it, it will guide you straight into a gratitude so profound that it could not have been found any other way. Suffering is universal. It does not matter how much money you have, how much success you have gained, or how carefully you plan your life. Pain comes to all: a broken heart, an illness, the loss of someone you love, the disappointments that seem to arrive uninvited. Each one of these experiences cuts deep. At first glance, they appear only as burdens, weights dragging you down. Yet in Buddhist teaching, these are not punishments, but opportunities. Without them, you might never awaken to the true richness of being alive. Gratitude does not grow in the shallow soil of constant ease. It takes root in the cracks suffering leaves behind. Dukkha teaches humility. When life is smooth, it is easy to believe you are in control. You make plans, chase goals, and think that effort alone guarantees results. But suffering reminds you that life is unpredictable. A single moment can alter everything. This recognition strips away arrogance and self-importance. You begin to see that you are part of something larger, that you are not the master of the universe, but a participant in its unfolding. From this place of humility, gratitude arises naturally, not as a forced thought, but as a genuine response. You learn to thank even the smallest gifts, knowing how easily they could be lost. Another blessing of suffering is the way it opens your heart to others. When you endure pain, you suddenly understand what it feels like to be vulnerable, to struggle, to cry in silence. This understanding creates empathy. You no longer dismiss another's pain as trivial because you know how sharp it can be. And from this empathy comes connection. Gratitude deepens when you realize how suffering binds us together, how it allows compassion to bloom. Instead of feeling isolated in your pain, you begin to see that you are part of a shared human story. Gratitude then arises not only for your own resilience, but also for the bonds that suffering makes possible. Challenges also reveal hidden strengths. You never truly know how strong you are until life tests you. Adversity forces you to discover resources you did not know existed: courage, patience, endurance, and wisdom. Think about the times you believed you could not go on, and yet you did. Those moments become milestones of gratitude. You look back, not with bitterness, but with awe. I survived that, and I grew. Without hardship, these inequalities would remain dormant, like seeds never watered. Suffering breaks the ground open, so that these seeds can grow. Gratitude then arises for the pain itself, because it called forth the best in you. Dukkha also strips away illusions. When everything is comfortable, it is easy to become distracted, chasing possessions, status, or empty pleasures. But when suffering arrives, all those illusions lose their shine. Suddenly, what really matters becomes clear: health, kindness, presence, love. The noise of life falls away, and what remains is truth. And with truth comes gratitude. You thank life for revealing what is real, for cutting through the fog of distraction. You begin to see that suffering, harsh as it is also cleansing, washing away the unnecessary, so you can focus on what truly nourishes you. Pain teaches patience in a way comfort never can. When you are forced to wait through long nights of grief or endure the slow pace of healing, you learn to soften into time rather than fight it. This patience becomes a source of strength and inner stability that carries you through all of life's uncertainties. Gratitude grows from recognizing that suffering gave you endurance, the ability to stand steady even when the storm has not yet passed. Without this, every inconvenience would feel unbearable. With it, you carry peace, even in the waiting. Another hidden gift of dukkha is the way it teaches you to savor joy more deeply. The taste of sweetness is more intense after bitterness. The warmth of the sun feels more radiant after cold days. In the same way, moments of happiness become sharper and richer when seen in contrast with suffering. Without sorrow, joy would be taken for granted, dulled by repetition. Gratitude expands because you know what it feels like to be without, and that absence sharpens your appreciation when life offers its blessings again. Suffering also teaches surrender. You cannot control everything. You cannot stop loss, prevent change, or dictate every outcome. When you finally accept this, something surprising happens. You relax, not because the pain is gone, but because you stop fighting reality. Gratitude emerges from this surrender. By giving up the impossible task of controlling life, you free yourself to see the good that still exists, even in hardship. You stop focusing only on what is broken and begin noticing what remains whole. There is yet another way suffering teaches gratitude. It forces presence. Pain anchors you in the body, in the moment, stripping away the mind's constant wandering. Even though it feels sharp, it demands your full attention. And in that attention, gratitude finds its entry point. You become aware of each breath, each small relief, each kind gesture from another person. Pain narrows your focus, and through that narrowing, you begin to see what you had once overlooked. Gratitude does not always enter through joy. Often it slips in quietly through the cracks that pain opens. Dukkha also reveals the impermanence of pain itself. In the midst of suffering, it feels endless, as though it will never ease. But eventually, like all things, it shifts. This realization builds trust in life's cycles. Just as joy does not last forever, neither does sorrow. Gratitude arises from the recognition that even the heaviest burdens are temporary. This understanding gives you courage to face future challenges because you know they too will pass. Gratitude is born in this awareness that nothing, not even suffering, has the power to stay forever. Suffering also awakens creativity. When the usual paths fail, when comfort is stripped away, you are forced to find new ways of thinking, new solutions, new expressions. Some of the greatest art, poetry, and wisdom in human history were born from pain. On a personal level, difficulty often unlocks fresh perspectives. Gratitude emerges as you realize that suffering did not only take it, also gave, pushing you to grow in ways ease never could. You learn to thank the very challenges that once felt unbearable, because they became gateways to transformation. Dukkha teaches resilience, not only in hardship, but also in recovery. When you heal, you look back with a kind of reverence for the process itself. Gratitude swells as you see how far you have come, how wounds turned into scars, and how scars became reminders of strength. Every healed wound is a story of survival, a testament to life's ability to mend itself. Gratitude for healing is perhaps one of the deepest forms, because it acknowledges both the pain and the recovery, both the wound and the wisdom that followed. There is also a profound gratitude that arises for the helpers that suffering brings into your life. Pain often draws out the kindness of others, a friend who listens, a stranger who offers support, a family member who stands beside you. These moments of care shine more brightly against the backdrop of suffering. Gratitude grows not only for the relief they provide, but for the reminder that even in darkness, humanity carries light. Suffering reveals generosity, patience, and love in the people around you, and that revelation becomes a source of lifelong thankfulness. Finally, suffering teaches you that gratitude itself is not fragile. It does not depend on perfect conditions. In fact, it thrives in imperfection. Even when life hurts, even when things fall apart, gratitude is still possible. It does not deny pain, but grows alongside it. You learn to say, "This hurts, and I am grateful for what it teaches me." That paradox is the true blessing of dukkha. Gratitude is no longer a mood that depends on good days, but a way of seeing that transforms every day, even the hardest ones, into a field of hidden gifts. As you let this truth settle into your heart, you begin to see that suffering is not a curse, but a path. It deepens you, softens you, strengthens you, and connects you. Gratitude is not something you find despite pain, but something you discover because of it. And this discovery changes the way you walk through life. Instead of resisting hardship, you meet it with open eyes, ready to learn, ready to grow, and ready to uncover the blessings waiting within. And now, having seen how even suffering can become a source of gratitude, the path opens further. The next step reveals not only your own lessons, but also the countless connections that make your very existence possible. Gratitude begins to expand beyond personal experience, stretching outward into the vast web of life that sustains you. Each thread of that web carries you, unseen yet essential, and recognizing it brings a new depth to being grateful for today. When suffering is understood as a teacher, gratitude flows even in the darkest valleys of life. You begin to see that pain itself can open the heart, making it more tender, more aware, and more alive to the truth that nothing exists on its own. The hardship you endured did not shape you in isolation. Every breath you took while surviving, every word of comfort you received, every resource that allowed you to continue, all of it came from connections greater than yourself. This is where the teaching of interbeing comes alive, showing you that gratitude does not stop with your own resilience, but extends outward into the vast, unseen web that supports you at every moment. Your very existence today is not a single achievement. It is the result of countless beings and causes converging in this instant. Think of the meal that gave you strength this morning. The food on your plate carries with it the labor of farmers who planted seeds, the rain that fell from distant clouds, the soil enriched by generations of fallen leaves, the sun that traveled millions of miles to nourish the plants, and the workers who harvested and transported them. When you pause to see this network, gratitude swells. Eating is no longer an ordinary act. It becomes an act of receiving a universe of care. Even the air in your lungs is a gift of interbeing. Trees, grasses, and forests far away release oxygen, without which you could not survive. In return, your breath nourishes the very plants that sustain you. You are not separate. You are in constant exchange with the world. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every breath you take is shared. Breathing itself becomes a moment of thanksgiving, a recognition of the unseen collaboration of all life. Consider also your body, the strength of your muscles, the beating of your heart, the clarity of your eyes. None of these belong only to you. They are the inheritance of countless ancestors who endured, survived, and passed their lives forward so that you might live today. Your DNA is a living record of struggles, victories, and love that shaped you before you even opened your eyes to this world. To live with gratitude for interbeing is to thank those who came before, not in distant or abstract reverence, but in real recognition that their lives still pulse within you today. This truth also appears in the simplest tools of daily life. A glass of water is never just water. It is rivers, rainfall, pipes, engineers, and the communities that built the systems to carry it to you. A single shirt is never just fabric. It is cotton fields, textile workers, ships that crossed oceans, and the careful hands that stitched it together. When you begin to see in this way, gratitude shifts from being something occasional to something constant, because you realize that nothing you touch is ever truly separate from others. Every comfort, every object, every resource is the result of countless invisible contributions. Interbeing also reveals gratitude in the challenges you have faced. When difficulty arrives, it is rarely your own strength alone that carries you through. It is often the presence of others, the doctor whose knowledge helps you heal, the friend whose listening ear softens your grief, the patience of teachers who guided you, the kindness of strangers who offered help at the right moment. All of these weaves into the story of how you endure. Gratitude expands as you realize that even in solitude, you have never truly been alone. The network of interbeing is always around you, whether visible or hidden, holding you up in ways you might never fully comprehend. This awareness softens the illusion of independence. Many people grow up believing they are entirely self-made, that their achievements belong solely to their effort. But when you trace every step backward, it becomes clear that every success carries with it countless influences. The books you read were written by others. The skills you gained were passed on by mentors. The opportunities you were given arose because someone, somewhere, created a path before you. Gratitude flourishes when you see this truth clearly, not as a diminishment of your effort, but as a celebration of the vast community of life that made it possible. Nature itself teaches into being constantly. The rain that seems like an inconvenience is the same rain that allows crops to grow and sustains the cycle of life. The forest that shades your walk is also the home of countless creatures who depend on its shelter. The birds whose songs greet you in the morning travel across skies shaped by winds that touch distant lands. You are not a separate observer of these things. You are woven into their rhythm. Gratitude arises not only for what they give to you, but also for the shared existence that makes life itself possible. This way of seeing also reshapes how you hold your relationships. Gratitude grows deeper when you understand that every person you meet carries within them a web of stories, experiences, and influences. The kindness of one person is never theirs alone. It is shaped by the parents who raised them, the teachers who guided them, the communities and cultures that nurtured them. Even conflicts can reveal into being, showing how another's behavior is often the echo of countless factors, many of them unseen. Gratitude blossoms when you recognize the complexity of others and appreciate the hidden forces that shape each encounter. Your thoughts and emotions also arise through into being. The music that stirs your feelings does so because of the artists who created it, the traditions that shaped it, and the instruments crafted by skilled hands. A single idea that passes through your mind may have roots in the books you have read, the conversations you have had, or the influence of people you may never meet. Gratitude arises when you stop claiming your inner world as solely yours, and instead recognize the endless threads that weave into your consciousness. Technology itself is another powerful reminder of this web of connection. The phone in your pocket is not a single object, but a global effort brought together by miners, designers, engineers, and workers, spread across continents. The electricity that charges it comes from power plants, rivers, fuels, or windmills, all part of interconnected systems that sustain it. Even your ability to read these very words arises from into being, a language shaped over centuries, literacy taught to you by others, and devices created through the vision and labor of countless minds. Gratitude becomes overwhelming when you see just how many lives and forces converge in something as seemingly simple as turning on a screen. Into being also teaches you to value what appears small or insignificant. A bee pollinating a flower far away may one day contribute to the fruit you eat. Months later, an unseen worker repairing roads makes it possible for you to travel safely without giving it a second thought. A stranger donating blood may one day save the life of someone you love. Gratitude expands as you recognize that your well-being rests upon countless acts of service you may never witness, gifts offered by people and beings who do not even know your name. Seeing this web clearly also begins to dissolve loneliness. When you feel disconnected, remembering into being reveals that you are never truly separate. The warmth of the sun touches your skin each day without asking for anything in return. The ground holds you steady beneath your feet. The food you eat carries the care and labor of farmers you will likely never meet. Gratitude arises from realizing that isolation is only an illusion. In reality, you are in constant relationship with the entire living world. This awareness also inspires responsibility. When you see how deeply connected everything is, gratitude compels you to care for what sustains you. You begin to thank the earth, not only in words, but in action, choosing to live with less waste, to protect water and soil, and to honor the natural cycles that make your life possible. Gratitude is no longer passive or abstract. It becomes active stewardship, a way of giving back to the vast web that has already given you everything. Gratitude, through into being, also reshapes your understanding of time. The present moment is never isolated. It carries within it both the past and the future. Every step you take today is shaped by the countless steps of history, and every choice you make now influences what is yet to come. You are both the result of innumerable causes and a cause yourself, sending ripples outward in ways you may never see. Gratitude deepens when you honor this position, thankful for the inheritance you have received, while mindful of the legacy you are creating. Even suffering itself gains new meaning when seen through interbeing. The hardships you endure may one day strengthen someone else, your story becoming a source of guidance or hope. Gratitude then arises, not only for what you receive, but for the chance to contribute back to the web of life. Your pain, transformed into wisdom, becomes part of the support that others will one day rely on. Interbeing reveals that gratitude is not simply about what flows to you, it is equally about what flows through you, moving outward into the lives of others. Everywhere you turn, the teaching of interbeing points to the same truth: nothing exists alone. The leaf is not separate from the tree is not separate from the soil is not separate from the rain, and you are not separate from any of it. Gratitude becomes not a practice you must try to remember, but a natural response to seeing reality clearly. When you see the web of life as it truly is, you cannot help but give thanks, because you recognize that everything around you already in countless ways giving itself to you. As this awareness deepens, life itself begins to transform. Meals are no longer just routines of sustenance, but sacred experiences. Each breath becomes a blessing, each relationship a mirror, reflecting countless lives intertwined across time and space. Gratitude is no longer something reserved for rare or extraordinary moments of joy. Instead, it becomes the posture through which you meet every single moment, because every single moment is supported by an infinity of causes that allow it to exist. To thank the unseen web of life is to thank life itself again and again, until thankfulness becomes indistinguishable from the way you live and breathe. When you begin to see interbeing clearly, gratitude ceases to be an abstract concept or a fleeting thought. It becomes a living awareness that shapes the way you move through the world. You begin to notice that the air you breathe, the clothes you wear, the ground that carries you, and even the challenges you face are all part of a web so vast that it humbles the mind. Yet there is one place where this truth becomes most immediate and undeniable, one place where the unseen network of life enters your body and sustains you in the most intimate way. Every meal you eat is not merely food, it is the story of the universe arriving on your plate. To eat without awareness is to miss this miracle, but to eat with mindfulness is to turn every bite into gratitude itself. Food is far more than fuel. It carries within it the energy of the sun, the gift of the rain, the nourishment of the earth, and the labor of countless hands. When you pause before a meal and bring awareness to it, you touch this reality. You see the grain that once swayed golden in wide open fields, the vegetables grown strong in soil alive with unseen microbes, the water that traveled through rivers, clouds, and storms, the work of farmers who rose before dawn, and the truck drivers, cooks, and servers who carried this gift along its journey to you. In this moment, gratitude deepens because you realize you are not simply eating a dish, you are receiving a gift of interdependence. Mindful eating begins with something very simple, yet profoundly transformative: slowing down. In a world that glorifies speed and multitasking, meals are often rushed, swallowed while scrolling through screens, or consumed in silence without thought. Yet when you choose to eat slowly, the act itself is transformed. You begin to notice the layers of flavor, the richness of textures, the warmth of soup as it touches your lips, or the crisp sweetness of fruit as it breaks in your mouth. Gratitude does not arise because the food is extraordinary, but because your attention is. The ordinary reveals itself as sacred the moment you stop to notice it fully. Awareness at the table also teaches respect. When you truly see the vast effort woven into your meal, waste becomes almost unthinkable. A single discarded grain of rice is not just a grain, it is the sweat of a farmer bent beneath the sun, the generosity of the living earth, and the energy of the sun itself that ripened it. Gratitude teaches you to honor food by taking only what you need and receiving it with reverence. This respect, born in the simple act of eating, extends far beyond the meal into your whole way of living. It shapes a deeper care for resources, for the planet that sustains you, and for all beings whose efforts and lives make your life possible. Mindful eating also reconnects you with your body in a way that is often forgotten. Many people eat while distracted, using food to numb emotions, fill inner emptiness, or silence discomfort, without listening to what the body truly asks for. But when you eat with awareness, you begin to notice hunger as it gently rises, fullness as it gradually arrives, and the quiet satisfaction that settles in when your body feels nourished. Gratitude flows naturally in this space of listening, as you realize that your body has always been communicating with you so clearly, asking not for indulgence or deprivation, but simply for balance. You begin to thank your body not only for guiding you through hunger and satiety, but for all the quiet, tireless work it performs without ever needing your command. It digests, transforms food into energy, repairs, sustains, and carries you through every moment of life. This simple acknowledgement deepens your appreciation for the living vessel you inhabit. Through mindfulness, you also begin to notice how deeply emotions are tied to food. A single bite of a family recipe can awaken vivid memories of childhood, carrying you back to kitchens filled with warmth and laughter. The faint aroma of a spice may recall the presence of loved ones who once cooked with care. Even a humble cup of tea has the power to soothe the heart after a difficult day. Food becomes more than taste. It becomes a bridge connecting you to time, to people, to experiences long past and still alive within you. Gratitude grows here as you learn to thank not just the flavor on your tongue, but the memories it holds, not just the nourishment, but the love carried through meals. Eating with mindfulness also reshapes the way you experience relationships. When you share a meal with others, you are not simply placing food on the table, you are sharing gratitude itself. The act of eating together transforms into a ceremony of presence and connection. Conversations deepen because you are no longer distracted. You are fully there, listening with the same attentive care you give to your food. Gratitude in this space is not silent. It expresses itself in words of appreciation for the company, in acknowledgement of the effort someone poured into preparing the meal, and in the joy of togetherness that binds people closer. Each bite becomes more than nourishment. It becomes a thread of connection, weaving lives together through the simple act of sharing presence at the table. Gratitude through mindful eating also awakens compassion. Every meal is the result of countless hands, many of which remain unseen and often unrecognized. To eat with awareness is to remember the worker bent over under the weight of the sun in the fields, the driver carrying goods across long distances, and the cook quietly preparing food in kitchens far and near. This awareness awakens not only thankfulness, but a desire to honor their labor, not just in thought, but in action. It inspires you to support fair trade, to reduce waste, to treat food with reverence, and to give thanks for the countless unseen hands that made your nourishment possible. In this way, gratitude becomes a bridge between you and those who sustain you, even if you never cross paths. Food also reflects the natural rhythm of the earth itself. A ripe fruit bursting with sweetness in summer, a hearty stew warming you in winter, the freshness of greens in spring. all carry the pulse of the seasons within them. When you eat with awareness, you taste not only the flavors, but the time of year, the cycles of nature unfolding in harmony around you. Gratitude expands into a sense of belonging as you recognize yourself as part of this rhythm, moving with the seasons, receiving their gifts, and returning your respect in how you live. Each meal becomes a reminder of the earth's generosity, a gentle call to align your life with the natural flow of abundance and renewal. Mindful eating also brings clarity about consumption itself. You begin to see with fresh eyes that food is not infinite, that its abundance is delicate and fragile, dependent on balance within ecosystems and fairness in human distribution. Gratitude, when it becomes genuine, cannot be separated from responsibility. You realize you cannot be truly grateful while also careless. Gratitude begins to guide your choices, perhaps eating less meat to ease the strain on the earth, choosing local produce to honor the land around you, or simply cherishing what you already have, instead of constantly demanding more. Gratitude transforms eating from an act of consumption into an act of stewardship. The act of chewing itself becomes a meditation. Each bite offers an invitation to slow the racing mind, to anchor yourself in the present moment. You notice the texture of the food, its transformation from solid to nourishment, the effortless yet profound act of swallowing. Gratitude for food merges with gratitude for the stillness it brings. Each meal becomes not just sustenance for the body, but also a grounding for the spirit, a way of returning again and again to the now. Meals cease to be mere interruptions in the rhythm of your day. Instead, they transform into pauses of clarity, like bells calling you back to presence and awareness. In these pauses, gratitude arises not only from the food before you, but also from the recognition that every meal carries stories that reach far beyond your own. A spice from a distant land holds within it centuries of trade, tradition, and cultural exchange. A grain cultivated over countless generations reflects the resilience and dedication of farmers who adapted to shifting climates and changing conditions so that nourishment could continue. To eat mindfully is to honor these stories, to give thanks not only for the food on your plate, but also for the countless lives and centuries of human effort, wisdom, and heritage that shaped it. In this way, each bite becomes a bridge to history, a way of acknowledging that you are never eating alone, but always in the company of those who came before. There is also the gift of healing carried within food. It restores energy after exhaustion, soothes the body during sickness, and comforts the spirit in moments of sorrow. When you bring awareness to eating, you begin to see that nourishment is never mechanical. It is a deeply caring act, life's way of tending to you. A warm bowl of soup when you are unwell, a cup of tea shared in grief, or bread passed around a community table are not only meals, they are acts of healing made visible. Gratitude expands when you recognize that food has always been medicine, always been a source of renewal offered generously by the world itself. In this practice, even silence becomes transformed. Eating without words or distractions allows you to meet your food directly, to encounter it without the noise of the outside world. Each moment at the table becomes full and complete, unbroken by interruption. Gratitude deepens in such silence because you begin to hear with your senses the crunch of fresh vegetables, the sip of tea, the steady rhythm of chewing. In this quiet presence, silence itself becomes a teacher, reminding you that gratitude does not require elaborate rituals or grand gestures. It arises naturally whenever you meet life as it is, with openness and attention. Mindful eating also brings a new awareness of impermanence. Each bite disappears as it nourishes you. Each flavor fades from the tongue. Each plate empties and nothing remains as it was. Far from being sorrowful, this impermanence makes the meal more precious. Gratitude is heightened precisely because you know it will not last. The sweetness of fruit, the warmth of fresh bread, the delicate aroma of spices, all vanish into memory and into energy that sustains you. To thank them as they pass is to thank life itself for its endless generosity, always giving and always moving. Even hunger begins to change its meaning through mindfulness. Instead of treating it as discomfort to be silenced quickly, you begin to recognize hunger as the body's way of reminding you of your dependence on life itself. Gratitude grows even for hunger because it shows you what sustains you, keeping you connected to the rhythm of needing and receiving. When food arrives to meet hunger, the gratitude doubles, thankful both for the reminder of dependence and for the gift of fulfillment. This practice of mindful eating also touches the heart with simplicity. A humble meal, when received with awareness, can awaken more gratitude than the grandest feast consumed in distraction. It is not the richness of the food itself, but the richness of attention you bring that awakens true thankfulness. A simple bowl of rice, a slice of bread, a piece of fruit, when seen fully, these become treasure. Gratitude teaches you that enough is not measured in quantity, but in depth of awareness. Through this practice, gratitude is no longer confined to special occasions or rare moments. It becomes daily, ordinary, seamlessly woven into the rhythm of living. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are no longer just routines. They are reminders of connection, generosity, and care. Gratitude becomes as natural and as regular as breathing, each meal a chance to remember that you are continually held by a world that gives itself to you again and again. And from here, the path of gratitude widens even further. Once you learn to find thankfulness in food, in breath, and in every ordinary moment, you begin to see that joy does not come from endlessly adding more to life, but from seeing more clearly what is already here. The next step reveals how the simplicity of life itself, lived without excess, holds within it a secret abundance waiting to be uncovered. When every meal is met with gratitude, life itself begins to slow down. Food no longer feels rushed, overlooked, consumed without thought. Instead, it becomes a reminder that the smallest details carry the greatest depth. Out of this awareness, a realization grows that joy is not discovered in accumulation, but in the stripping away of distraction. The heart starts to crave simplicity, a rhythm of living that allows space for gratitude to breathe. This is where Buddhist monastic life offers its most profound lesson. Far from being an exercise in austere deprivation, the simplicity of monastic living reveals an abundance most of the world continually overlooks. Within the quiet order of monastic rhythms lies a joy so deep and steady that it transforms how you see everything you already have. Monastic life is built upon patterns of mindfulness, rising early with the sun, moving through the day with deliberate steps, balancing work, rest, and meditation. All of these create stability. Gratitude arises not from novelty or constant stimulation, but from constancy. The repeated actions of daily life, when done with full attention, transform into treasures. Washing a bowl, sweeping a floor, chanting a verse. Each act is both practical and sacred. Within this steady rhythm, life stops feeling scattered and begins to feel whole. Gratitude flows naturally because you finally see that every small act is already enough. Simplicity also unveils a deeper kind of freedom. In a world drowning in choices, possessions, and distractions, simplicity cuts through the noise. A monk does not require a closet full of clothes or shelves heavy with decorations in order to feel complete. One robe, one bowl, one mat. These are not signs of lack, but symbols of liberation. Gratitude grows when you release the endless chase for options and allow your heart to rest in sufficiency. With fewer distractions, the richness of what remains shines even brighter. A single cup of tea becomes an occasion. A shared silence becomes nourishment. Joy comes not from having more, but from needing less, and gratitude naturally becomes the ground of your being. This simplicity also reshapes your relationship with time. In modern life, time often feels rushed, fragmented, and consumed by endless obligations. But in the steady rhythm of monastic living, time is not measured in deadlines or noise, but in bells, in chanting, and in mindful pauses. Each sound and practice serve as a reminder, calling you back again and again to the present. Gratitude expands as you begin to understand that you do not need more hours in the day. What you need is more presence within the hours you already have. The joy of monastic life is not that it stretches time, but that it deepens it. Every moment is made full, simply because it is met with fullness of attention. The discipline of simplicity also awakens gratitude for the very basics of existence. When you live with little, you come to notice just how much you already have. A roof over your head, a bed to rest in, clean water to drink. These no longer seem small or ordinary. They become treasures in themselves, reminders that life continually provides more than enough. They become gifts. The abundance that consumer culture promises is revealed as an illusion, because joy does not multiply with possessions. Gratitude deepens when you realize that true well-being depends far less on accumulation and far more on awareness. By stripping life down to its essentials, simplicity uncovers the quiet wealth that has always been present, but too often overlooked. Within this clarity, even the most ordinary aspects of life begin to glow with meaning. Simplicity also cultivates gratitude through community. In monasteries, meals are shared, work is divided, and silence is observed together. This interdependence strengthens bonds and diminishes the illusion of separateness. Gratitude arises not only for what you receive, but also for the opportunity to contribute, for the harmony that emerges when lives are lived in rhythm with one another. In contrast to modern life, which often isolates and fragments, monastic life weaves together, reminding you that abundance is not measured in possessions, but in connections. The joy of belonging to something larger replaces the loneliness of constant striving. Another gift of monastic simplicity lies in the way it reshapes desire. In ordinary life, desire constantly grows. New goals, new cravings, new demands endlessly arise. But when you live simply, desire begins to quiet. Gratitude expands because the endless cycle of comparison and competition gradually fades. With fewer wants, the heart can finally rest. Joy arises not from chasing what is missing, but from embracing what is already present. This inner sufficiency is the greatest wealth simplicity can offer, a wealth that cannot be purchased or lost, but only recognized. Work itself becomes an expression of gratitude. In monasteries, tasks are carried out, not for profit, but for care. Care of the space, care of the body, and care of the community. Sweeping a courtyard is not merely cleaning, it is cultivating clarity of mind. Cooking is not just the act of preparing food, it is the offering of nourishment. Gratitude grows when you begin to see your own daily tasks through this lens. Simplicity also deepens the appreciation of silence. In the modern world, noise is constant, screens flashing, conversations buzzing, advertisements calling, and background sounds filling every space. Silence is rare and often avoided. But in monastic life, silence is cherished, woven into the day as a practice of awareness. Gratitude swells when you finally hear the silence that has always been present beneath the noise. In silence, the mind finds rest, the heart softens, and joy becomes easier to touch. Silence is not emptiness, but fullness, a reminder that peace does not need to be created. It is already here, patiently waiting to be noticed. The simplicity of monastic rhythms also nurtures gratitude for the body. Rising early, eating mindfully, walking slowly, and meditating are all practices that honor the body's natural cycles. There is no rush to exhaust it, no demand to exploit it. Gratitude grows as you begin to see how your body responds to such care, with more energy, more clarity, and more peace. You learn to thank your body not only for carrying you through hardship, but for being the very ground of your practice. Monastic life teaches that caring for the body is not indulgence, but reverence, a way of honoring the precious gift of being alive. Simplicity further teaches gratitude for nature in profound ways. When distractions fall away, the natural world comes alive with vividness. The sound of rain striking the earth, the warmth of sunlight spilling across the skin, the sight of a tree swaying gracefully in the wind. These no longer fade into the background, but instead become central experiences. Gratitude swells as you reconnect with rhythms older and wiser than your own, rhythms that remind you that life is not something to control but something to harmonize with. Realizing that joy does not need entertainment becomes a profound awakening when you see that the world itself is already overflowing with wonder. Monastic simplicity is not an escape from life. It is a deeper immersion into its raw and unfiltered beauty. Living with little also teaches adaptability. When you rely less on external conditions for happiness, resilience begins to grow naturally. Gratitude arises from the recognition of how little is truly required for well-being. A simple meal has the power to sustain you. A quiet space is enough to bring peace. A single robe can clothe you. This realization transforms the way you meet change, because your joy no longer depends on fragile comfort. Gratitude flows easily when you discover the freedom that comes from being released from constant craving, for joy is no longer something sought, but something revealed within. The rhythm of monastic life also sharpens awareness of interdependence. With fewer distractions, you begin to notice more clearly how every aspect of life is deeply connected. Gratitude arises when you see how much care and effort are woven into sustaining even the simplest of lives. Planting, cleaning, cooking, and maintaining the work of living shows itself as a web of mutual support. Nothing is separate, and everything matters. This awareness makes gratitude a continuous presence, for each act reveals the invisible threads of connection that allow you to exist. Life itself becomes a gift seen through the lens of interdependence. Simplicity further reveals abundance through repetition. When tasks and rituals are repeated daily, they cease to be mundane and begin to carry depth. Chanting the same verses, sweeping the same floor, eating the same food, all of these become not dull routines, but profound practices. Repetition becomes a deepening rather than a numbing, for it teaches you to see that newness is not always found in novelty, but in awareness. The same act, when done with presence, uncovers infinite layers of meaning. Gratitude arises from this shift, for joy is found not in constant variety, but in the attentive presence brought to each moment. The practice of simplicity also exposes how much suffering is created by excess. Too many choices, too many possessions, too many distractions. These do not liberate, but instead weigh the heart down. They overwhelm rather than satisfy. Gratitude expands when you release these burdens and discover how much lighter and clearer life feels. The joy of simplicity is not deprivation, but clarity. It allows you to see more vividly, feel more deeply, and live more freely. Gratitude naturally becomes the ground of life. when the unnecessary has been stripped away, leaving space for what truly matters. Monastic rhythms also highlight the power of consistency. Gratitude is not discovered through rare grand gestures, but through steady and faithful practice, daily meditation, mindful work, and simple meals. Each build a quiet foundation of stability. Constancy itself becomes a teacher, showing that joy is not a sudden gift that arrives unannounced, but a steady cultivation, nurtured moment by moment. Gratitude arises as you see how these small repeated actions form a life that feels whole, grounded, and peaceful. The joy of simplicity also reveals itself in the gift of contentment. When the restless search for the next thing is finally abandoned, you begin to rest in what is already here. Contentment is not resignation, but deep appreciation. It is the quiet joy of realizing you have enough in this very moment. Gratitude grows in this recognition because you are no longer trapped by longing. Instead, you see that life already contains abundance, and that abundance becomes visible only when desire grows silent. Through simple monastic rhythms, gratitude becomes inseparable from daily life. Every bell, every breath, and every step become a reminder. Joy is revealed not through adding more, but through stripping away what conceals the truth that was always present. Gratitude, then, is no longer occasional but constant, no longer dependent on circumstances, but steady as the ground beneath your feet. The abundance revealed by simplicity is not hidden in distant places or reserved for extraordinary events. It is present here, in the life you already live, waiting quietly for you to notice. From this realization, the journey continues. Once you taste the joy of simplicity, you begin to see gratitude, even in the most basic miracle of existence, the breath itself. Each inhale becomes a gift, each exhale a release, and the rhythm of breathing emerges as the first and most enduring teacher of gratitude. Within the monastic rhythms of simplicity, a hidden wealth is uncovered in what has always surrounded you. Joy arises not from adding more, but from noticing more deeply, not from owning, but from being present. Beneath the rhythm of daily life lies something even more fundamental, something so constant that it is often overlooked. Before food, before shelter, before speech, there is breath. Without it, nothing continues. With it, everything is possible. Breath itself is the most intimate teacher of gratitude, always available, always giving, always reminding you of both life's fragility and its abundance in the same moment. Breathing is often dismissed as automatic, relegated to the background of awareness, a mere function of the body. Yet when attention turns toward it, the ordinary reveals its extraordinary depth. Each inhale becomes a miracle. The body receives air without demand, oxygen flows into the blood, and life is renewed again and again. Each exhale becomes an act of letting go, a surrender of what the body no longer needs, a bow to impermanence itself. Gratitude grows when you see this cycle, not as mechanical, but as the very pulse of existence. The inhale teaches reception. With no effort beyond allowing, life enters freely. Air moves into the lungs, offering energy, vitality, and clarity. Gratitude naturally arises for the invisible generosity of the earth, for the trees, the oceans, the ecosystems that silently sustain your every breath. In this simple act, you are reminded that you are constantly supported, that life itself is being gifted to you one breath at a time. The exhale teaches release. Just as life gives, it also takes away. Exhaling is not a loss, but a renewal, for the body clears itself of carbon dioxide to make space for what is next. Gratitude arises when you realize that letting go is not an ending, but a condition for continuation. Each exhale becomes a lesson in trust. Trust that another breath will follow. Trust that spaciousness must exist for life to flow. Trust that clinging to what has already served its purpose only creates stagnation. Breath becomes the great teacher of impermanence, speaking with a clarity sharper than words. No breath lasts forever. The inhale cannot be held endlessly. The exhale cannot be resisted indefinitely. Gratitude deepens as you begin to see that life itself is a series of arrivals and departures. To resist this rhythm is to suffer. To accept it is to find peace. By observing the breath, you learn how to flow with change, how to honor each moment as both passing and precious. Attention to breath grounds you in the present in a way nothing else can. While the mind races into past regrets or future worries, the breath anchors you in the immediacy of now. Each inhale whispers here, each exhale affirms now. In this rhythm, gratitude ceases to be a fleeting practice and becomes a living presence woven into the very fabric of existence. Gratitude grows when you realize that presence is not something distant that must be chased or achieved, but something that has always been waiting quietly in your breath. This simple awareness transforms into medicine for restlessness, a balm for anxiety, and a gentle reminder that peace is available in the smallest of acts. Each inhale and exhale become a doorway into stillness. Breath also uncovers the intimate link between body and mind. When the body holds tension, breathing becomes shallow and rushed. When the body is at ease, breathing deepens and nurtures calm. Gratitude expands as you recognize that you carry within yourself the power to soothe your being, not through force or control, but through soft attention. The body, when met with care, responds with ease, guiding you back to balance through nothing more than the rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. The cycle of breath also emerges as a teacher of patience. Breathing cannot be forced or rushed. No matter how quickly you try to move through life, the breath continues at its own steady pace. Gratitude deepens when you begin to align with this natural rhythm, allowing it to slow you down and remind you that life does not require constant speed. Patience grows naturally from this alignment, and with it comes a deep thankfulness for the calm and clarity that patience brings. Breathing also reveals your dependence on the natural world. Without trees, without oceans, without the delicate balance of ecosystems, there would be no oxygen to inhale. Each breath ties you to forests, rivers, winds, and unseen cycles of renewal. Gratitude arises when you see that breathing is not an isolated act, but a constant relationship with the earth. Each inhale is a gift from the planet. Each exhale is a return, a quiet offering back. Gratitude expands beyond the self, blossoming into reverence for the world that makes every breath possible. The fragility of breath reveals the preciousness of life itself. Missing even a few breaths brings urgency, fear, and a sudden recognition of how thin the line is between life and death. Gratitude blooms in the awareness of this fragility when you realize how easily the breath could be lost and how often its gift is taken for granted. Every inhale becomes survival renewed. Every exhale becomes proof that you are alive in this moment. Even if the future remains uncertain, gratitude grows sharper, more immediate, when you remember how delicate and fleeting this gift truly is. The breath also reflects the movements of emotion. In anger, it grows hot and quick. In sadness, it turns heavy and slow. In joy, it flows freely and light. Gratitude arises when you notice this mirror, when you see that breath offers an honest reflection of your inner world without judgment. In paying attention, you are offered insight and the opportunity to soften, to calm, to relax. Breath becomes a teacher of self-knowledge, and gratitude naturally follows this deepening of awareness. The rhythm of breathing also reveals the principle of balance. Inhale and exhale, receiving and releasing, filling and emptying. Neither can exist without the other. Gratitude emerges when you see that life does not thrive in extremes, but in rhythm. The breath teaches that balance is never static, but always dynamic, a continuous movement between opposites. Gratitude deepens as you apply this wisdom beyond the body, into your relationships, your choices, and the flow of life itself. Breathing is also communal, for with each breath, you share the same air with all beings. The invisible atmosphere becomes a shared thread connecting you to others, near and far, human and non-human, past and future. Each breath carries not only life, but belonging. The exhale of one becomes the inhale of another, and gratitude arises when you recognize that you are always in exchange with the world, human and non-human, near and far. You are never truly separate. Each breath is a bond invisible but real, connecting you to everything around you. Gratitude then becomes not only personal but collective, a way of honoring the shared breath of all life. Awareness of breath also has the power to transform suffering. In moments of pain or fear, when the body struggles and the mind feel unsettled, turning attention to the breath offers steadiness. It grounds you, keeping you present with what is difficult without being overwhelmed. Gratitude grows from the recognition that breath is always available as refuge, a constant companion that supports you in silence. Breath reveals generosity. No one owns the air. It is given freely, without discrimination, sustaining every being equally. Gratitude arises when you reflect on this truth, recognizing that life itself is built on a generosity far beyond human control. The air is shared by all, endlessly given and renewed. Gratitude deepens when you embody this recognition, choosing to live generously in return. The practice of observing the breath also teaches discipline. Returning again and again to the inhale and exhale strengthens your attention. The mind wanders, but the breath is always there, waiting. Gratitude grows when you see that stability need not be chased in distant places. It is already here, present in the simple rhythm of breathing. This discipline born of breath is not harsh but gentle, a practice of returning, of beginning again, endlessly supported by life itself. Every breath also carries memory. The air you breathe today has moved through forests, oceans, mountains, and the bodies of countless beings before you. To inhale is to touch history, to participate in a flow that stretches back far beyond your own lifetime. Gratitude arises when you realize that breath is a living link between past and present, a continuity that connects you to ancestors, to the earth, and to the unfolding of existence itself. Breath is also a reminder of equality, regardless of wealth, status, or belief. Every person. Gratitude deepens when you see this common thread, when you recognize that beneath all differences, the breath unites every being. The same rhythm sustains all life, and gratitude becomes not only appreciation for your own breath, but reverence for the shared life that binds humanity together. In the stillness of night, when distractions fade, the breath becomes even more vivid. Each rise and fall of the chest is like a lullaby of presence, a rhythm that carries you gently into rest. Gratitude grows in this quiet recognition, in the awareness that the breath never demands your attention, yet continues to offer its gift. To thank the breath is to thank life itself, again and again, with every inhale and every exhale. When you come to see the breath as the first teacher of gratitude, you realize that thankfulness does not require possessions, events, or achievements. It is already woven into the act of being alive. Every inhale is a gift you did not earn. Every exhale is a release you cannot resist. To live with this awareness is to live in constant gratitude, carried by the breath that sustains you moment after moment until the final one. And from this most intimate teacher, the path continues outward. Once you learn gratitude in the breath, you begin to recognize it even in what appears empty. Silence, space, and absence reveal their own quiet gifts, and gratitude expands to embrace not only what fills life, but also what. The next lesson lies in these vast and quiet expanses that allow life to exist at all. Breath itself shows that gratitude is woven into every moment, as each inhale grants life and each exhale teach release. Yet behind the rhythm of breathing lies something even more subtle, something so easily overlooked, precisely because it seems empty. Between the inhale and the exhale, there is space. Around every object, there is openness. Within every pause, there is silence. At first glance, emptiness feels like nothing, but in truth, it is the foundation of everything. In Buddhist teaching, this is called shunyata, the emptiness that is not void but potential, the silent teacher that reveals abundance through absence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that without space, nothing could exist at all. Space gives form its meaning. A cup holds water, not because of its solid walls, but because of the emptiness inside. A house shelters not because of its bricks, but because of the space they enclose. Even words carry meaning only because of the silence between sounds. Gratitude arises when you begin to see that emptiness is not lack, but the very condition of usefulness. To appreciate space is to recognize that what often feels invisible is in fact the essential element that allows life to function. Emptiness also teaches humility. The self you cling to so tightly is not a fixed and unchanging entity, but rather a composition of countless conditions, body, thoughts, feelings, history, all shifting, all interdependent. Gratitude grows when you realize that the solid identity you once believed in is itself empty of permanence. This emptiness does not erase you. Instead, it frees you. It allows you to be flexible, open, and alive. Gratitude emerges as you understand that emptiness makes growth possible, precisely because nothing is locked in stone. Silence, too, is a form of emptiness that carries its own lessons. Without silence, music would dissolve into noise, speech would collapse into chaos, and thought would lose all clarity. The pauses are what shape the sound. Gratitude arises when you learn to thank silence, not merely as absence, but as presence, the fertile ground on which communication rests. In silence you meet yourself. In silence you listen deeply. In silence you uncover wisdom that words cannot hold. Space is also what allows relationship. Between two people, there must be room, the freedom to breathe, to be, and to grow. Too much grasping suffocates, and too much control stifles. Gratitude grows when you honor the space within relationships as a gift, a reminder that love flourishes, not by erasing difference, but by allowing openness. Gratitude extends not only to closeness, but also to distance, for it is the space that lets connection breathe. Emptiness also reveals possibility. A blank page may be empty, yet within its openness lies the potential for infinite stories. A still canvas holds the promise of countless forms. Gratitude arises when you begin to see that emptiness is never barren, but is instead the birthplace of all creation, a silent expanse from which new life, expression, and meaning emerge. An empty room may at first appear bare, yet it is filled with the potential of gatherings, conversations, and lives waiting to unfold. Gratitude emerges when you stop fearing emptiness as absence and begin seeing it as promise. Shunyata teaches that nothingness is not deadness but potentiality, the boundless field from which everything arises. Thankfulness deepens when you honor emptiness as the silent womb of creation, the unseen source that makes all things possible. The teaching of emptiness also frees you from attachment. When you recognize that all things are empty of fixed essence, you release the need to cling so tightly. Gratitude grows as you begin to see that even the hardest moments carry within them emptiness, meaning they too can change, dissolve, and give birth to something new. Emptiness makes transformation possible. Gratitude arises not only for the forms that appear in life, but for the openness that ensures no form can ever trap you forever. Space itself becomes a teacher in your daily life. In a world obsessed with filling every moment, emptiness often feels uncomfortable, even threatening. But when you allow gaps, unstructured time, uncluttered rooms, pauses in conversation, you discover rest. Gratitude expands as you realize that emptiness restores, emptiness heals, and emptiness invites creativity. Without space, life suffocates. With space, joy has room to unfold. Shunyata also teaches equality, because nothing has an independent, permanent essence. All things are interdependent and of equal value. Gratitude grows when you see that no being is separate, no one superior, and nothing self-existing. Emptiness levels arrogance, reminding you that everything arises together, supported by everything else. Gratitude then becomes reverence for this shared emptiness, for the truth that life belongs to no one, and yet includes everyone. Space also allows awareness to arise. In meditation, when thoughts grow quiet, you encounter the vast openness of mind. At first, it may feel empty, but soon you recognize that this emptiness is freedom, it is clarity, it is peace. Gratitude naturally arises for this inner space, the quiet within that makes it possible to see without distortion. Without emptiness, the mind would be crowded with endless chatter. With emptiness, it becomes clear as a sky after a storm. Even suffering, when seen through the lens of emptiness, carries hidden relief. Pain feels solid, unchangeable, overwhelming, yet emptiness reveals that pain too is constructed, arising from conditions and lacking permanence. Gratitude emerges when you realize that no suffering is absolute, that within its very structure lies the potential to dissolve. Emptiness softens despair, turning even hardship into a doorway of transformation. Gratitude also arises for the way emptiness shapes beauty. The sky is breathtaking because it is vast and open. A garden feels peaceful because of the spaces between trees, the quiet intervals between blooms. A painting breathes because of the empty spaces between strokes. Gratitude for emptiness awakens a new way of seeing, where absence itself becomes presence, and where gaps reveal meaning rather than deny it. Space, too, teaches generosity. A crowded mind clings, and a crowded life hoard. Emptiness, on the other hand, creates the possibility of release, of sharing, of giving freely without fear of loss. To honor space is to embrace generosity, for it is in openness that abundance truly flows. When you create emptiness by letting go, whether by releasing possessions, clearing overfilled schedules, or softening the grip of old grudges, you make space not only for yourself, but also for others. Gratitude expands when you recognize that emptiness is not selfishness, but offering. To give space is to give freedom. To embrace emptiness is to allow others the room they need to grow. Gratitude flows naturally when you choose to live lightly, leaving space for the world to breathe alongside you. Emptiness also reveals impermanence in its purest form. All forms arise and eventually pass away, but in their leaving, they return to space. That space is constant, untouched, patiently waiting for the next arising. Gratitude arises when you realize that while forms continually shift, openness remains. There is comfort in this constancy, in knowing that space itself cannot be destroyed. Gratitude deepens when you rest in this truth, finding stability not in forms that change, but in the emptiness that holds them all. Shunyata teaches interconnectedness in a profound way, for everything is empty of an independent self. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything exists only through relation. A flower is empty of separate being, but full of soil, rain, sunlight, time, and human care. Gratitude emerges when you see that emptiness does not signify nothingness, but fullness of connection. Every empty thing becomes a doorway into interbeing. Gratitude grows as you come to understand that emptiness itself is what ties all life together. When you meet emptiness directly, fear begins to dissolve. Much of human fear arises from clinging to self, to permanence, to certainty. Yet emptiness reveals that there is nothing fixed to lose. Gratitude arises when you understand this truth, for it shows that you are free to live without the burden of fearing what will end. Emptiness becomes liberation, a teacher that guides you toward living lightly, gratefully, and without change. In daily life, gratitude for space appears in the simplest of ways. It is found in the pause between tasks, the breath between words, and the silence of morning before the world fully wakes. These are not wasted intervals, but gifts waiting to be honored. Gratitude deepens when you stop filling these moments with noise and begin treating them as opportunities for renewal. Emptiness gives rhythm to life, making activity meaningful and rest restorative. Even death itself can be understood through this lens. The body dissolves, the sense of self returns to emptiness, but emptiness is not destruction. It is a return to possibility. Gratitude arises for this mystery, for the reminder that endings are never final, but transformations. To thank emptiness is to thank the groundless ground from which all life springs, and to which it ultimately returns. The silent teacher of emptiness reveals that life is not defined only by what is present, but also by what is absent, by the spaces that hold form. Gratitude deepens when you learn to honor both the fullness of form and the openness of space. When you live with this awareness, every silence becomes music, every emptiness becomes abundance, and every absence becomes a reminder of possibility. And so the path continues. Once you learn to bow to emptiness as a teacher, you begin to see that even karma, the unfolding of causes and effects, whether pleasant or difficult, becomes an opportunity for gratitude. Not only the easy conditions, but also the painful ones carry lessons, shaping wisdom and guiding you deeper into the truth of life. Emptiness reveals itself as the quiet teacher that makes everything possible, showing that what at first appears absent is often the source of the deepest abundance. Yet life is not formed only by openness and space. It is also shaped by the threads of cause and effect, the invisible patterns we call karma. Every thought, every word, and every action leaves behind traces, and those traces eventually return in ways both gentle and difficult. While it is natural to feel grateful for pleasant karma, the greater challenge lies in meeting the painful consequences with the same openness of heart. To see karma not as punishment, but as guidance, is to unlock a deeper form of gratitude, one that welcomes even hardship as an opportunity for wisdom. Karma is often misunderstood as fate, as though life were rigidly predetermined by past actions, with no room for change. In truth, karma is not a fixed decree, but a dynamic law of cause and effect, constantly shaping and reshaping experience. Gratitude arises when you realize that karma is not about judgment, but about learning. Every difficulty carries within it a lesson. Every setback offers a message, and every disappointment becomes a doorway to growth. Gratitude begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and instead start asking, "What can this teach me?" When painful karma appears, it strips away illusions of control. Plans collapse, relationships end, health falters, and expectations dissolve. In those moments, the ego resists, demanding fairness and wishing life were otherwise. But gratitude grows when you begin to see that such experiences, though unwelcome, are not meaningless. They force you to cultivate resilience, patience, and humility. They remind you of how little you truly control and how much more there is to learn. Gratitude does not arise for the suffering itself, but for the wisdom it calls forth, for the strength it awakens in you that comfort could never reveal. Difficult karma also exposes the hidden patterns you carry within. Perhaps it reveals anger that repeats itself, attachments that cling too tightly, or fears that silently dictate your choices. Without challenges, these patterns might remain buried, quietly shaping the course of your life without awareness. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that painful karma acts as a mirror, reflecting back the habits and wounds that need attention. Without this reflection, growth would stagnate. Thankfulness comes when you realize that discomfort points directly to the places where freedom is possible. Another blessing of karma is its reminder of responsibility. Every action matters. Harsh words ripple outward into the world, just as acts of kindness do. Gratitude grows when you recognize that you are not powerless, but continually shaping conditions for your future. Even when past actions bring hardship, you can plant new seeds in the present through mindfulness, compassion, and care. Gratitude arises from this sense of empowerment, from knowing that today's choices can soften tomorrow's difficulties, that the cycle of karma is not a chain, but a field where new intentions can take root. Karma also carries within it the possibility of forgiveness. Often, the hardest lessons do not come from strangers but from those closest to you. Betrayal, conflict, and misunderstanding sting more deeply when they arise in the bonds of intimacy. Gratitude begins when you see these experiences not as random cruelty, but as part of karmic unfolding. When you recognize that others too are shaped by their own causes and conditions, forgiveness becomes possible. Gratitude emerges as you release resentment and begin to understand that even painful encounters gave you something valuable: insight into patience, compassion, and the shared struggles of being human. Difficult karma also refines compassion for others. When you experience loss, you begin to understand grief more deeply. When illness touches your life, tenderness naturally arises for those enduring the same struggles. Gratitude emerges when you recognize that your own pain is not only personal, but also a bridge that connects you to the suffering of others. Hardship softens the heart, making it more spacious and tender, and in that tenderness, gratitude flows for the deeper bonds of empathy that karma cultivates. Within karmic unfolding, there is also a profound lesson in impermanence. No result, however painful, lasts forever. A season of suffering shifts in the same way joy does. Gratitude arises when you remember that karma is fluid and never fixed, that each moment carries within it the potential for change, renewal, and transformation. Even the hardest lessons lose their sharpness with time, leaving behind wisdom in place of pain. Gratitude deepens as you come to see how suffering evolves, how it leaves space for clarity and growth once its immediate sting has passed. Karma also reveals how your life is woven into a tapestry much larger than yourself. What you experience is never truly isolated. It is bound to countless interactions, choices, and influences across time. The generosity of another may have set the stage for your present opportunities, just as your past actions ripple outward to shape the lives of others. Gratitude arises when you begin to see karma as into being in motion, a living reminder that your existence is part of an intricate web of shared causes and effects. Another teaching of karma is surrender. So often, you cannot undo what has already been done. You can only meet its unfolding with presence and awareness. Gratitude grows when you stop resisting the reality of what is here and begin to accept it without bitterness. In surrendering, you discover peace, not in controlling outcomes, but in aligning with the truth of how life actually moves. Gratitude arises for this shift in perspective, for the freedom that comes from laying down the exhausting struggle of demanding that life unfold differently than it does. Karma also refines discernment. Through experience, you learn to recognize which actions bring suffering and which lead toward peace. Even painful consequences carry within them the seeds of wisdom, sharpening your awareness and guiding you toward more skillful choices in the future. Gratitude deepens when you understand that karma is not a burden, but a teacher, patiently showing you how to live with greater care and clarity. Joy itself carries karmic lessons as well. Gratitude expands when you realize that ease, success, or happiness are not random gifts, but the ripening of seeds planted long before. Instead of taking such moments for granted, you begin to honor them as evidence that your actions matter. Gratitude arises not only for the sweetness of joy, but also for the path that created it, reminding you to continue planting seeds of kindness, patience, and generosity. Karma also teaches equanimity. Life brings both pleasant and unpleasant results, and gratitude grows when you stop clinging desperately to one while rejecting the other. By meeting both with balance, you discover a peace that is not dependent on constant pleasure. Gratitude arises for the wisdom of this teaching, which shows you how to embrace the full spectrum of life without being trapped by its fluctuations. Through karmic lessons, humility also takes root. Hardships remind you that you are not exempt from life's universal laws. Gratitude arises for this humbling truth because it softens pride and deepens compassion. Humility opens you to learning, makes you more receptive to wisdom, and strengthens your connection with others. In this way, even difficult karma carries hidden gifts, and gratitude grows when you recognize the value of being humbled. Finally, gratitude for karma deepens when you realize that it shapes your spiritual path itself. Without difficulty, there would be no pressing reason to turn inward, no strong call to seek wisdom. Many turn to practice not because life is smooth, but because karma presents pain that cannot be ignored. Gratitude arises for this catalyst, for the way challenge compels you to search more deeply for meaning, truth, and freedom. Gratitude arises for these turning points, even when they come wrapped in hardship, because they awaken within you the search for truth and freedom. Karmic lessons call you to cultivate patience with life itself. Results often ripen slowly, not according to the timeline you prefer or desire. Gratitude deepens when you learn to trust this unfolding, to accept that seeds may take years to bear fruit. In this way, patience itself becomes a form of gratitude in action, a recognition that life's timing belongs to life, and that wisdom only reveals itself when conditions are fully ready. When karma is reframed as teacher, gratitude takes on a stability it did not have before. It no longer rests only on receiving what pleases you. Instead, it becomes resilient, capable of blooming even in difficulty. Gratitude expands when you see that karma in all its forms is not an enemy, but a guide, always pointing you toward greater awareness, compassion, and balance. Life ceases to feel like opposition and begins to feel like instruction. Gratitude is no longer reserved for the sweet fruits alone, but extends to the bitter ones too, for both nourish growth in their own way. Though life's lessons are sometimes harsh, they are always instructive. Gratitude grows when you recognize that every experience, pleasant or painful, is part of the path of unfolding. As gratitude for karma takes root, the journey itself opens more fully. Each step you take, each lesson you meet, each seed you plant connects you more deeply to the earth beneath your feet. Gratitude shifts from being a thought in the mind to becoming a movement of the body, expressed through the simple act of walking. In this way, the practice of gratitude is not only contemplation, but also embodiment. The next teaching reveals itself in the recognition that every step is a thank you to the ground that supports you, to the earth that sustains you, to the path that always meets your feet without fail. Karma shows that every action holds a lesson, every moment holds potential for growth. Gratitude blossoms not just in what delights or comforts you, but equally in what challenges you, because both are part of the same unfolding truth. Yet not all lessons are uncovered in reflection or memory. Some of the most profound are discovered in the simplest act of being alive right now. Few practices make this clearer than walking meditation. With each step, you are reminded of the earth that supports you, of the bond between your body and the ground, of the quiet life that sustains you with every movement. Gratitude deepens when walking becomes more than transportation, more than a way to arrive at another place. Walking itself becomes thanksgiving, each step a gesture of reverence for life. Walking is so often treated as a means to an end, a hurried bridge between one task and another. But in mindful walking, the journey is no longer a corridor to the future. It becomes the destination itself. Each step is an invitation to return to presence, to feel the touch of your foot against the earth, to sense the rhythm of your body in motion. Gratitude expands when you stop rushing past these details and begin honoring them instead. Every step whisper, I am alive. Every step speaks, the earth carries me. In this way, walking becomes prayer, a steady stream of thank yous offered to the ground beneath your feet. The practice begins with awareness of contact. As your foot touches the earth, notice its firmness, its softness, its texture, its quiet stability. Gratitude arises for the earth's unshakable support, for its silent willingness to carry you without demand or complaint. This awareness brings humility, for you recognize that no step, no journey, no movement is possible without the ground beneath you. Gratitude ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes something embodied, felt in weight, in balance, in the steady return of the earth, meeting your body again and again. Walking meditation also slows the restless movement of the mind. The steady rhythm of each step draws your attention away from scattered thoughts and anchors it in direct experience. Gratitude grows when you realize that the earth itself becomes a teacher of calm, grounding you not through force or effort, but through its quiet, steady presence. Each step becomes a reminder that peace is already here, that you are supported in every moment, and that you do not need to run anywhere to find it. This simple practice transforms the ordinary act of walking into an invitation to rest in the present. The practice also awakens reverence for the body. Walking reveals the miracle of muscles, balance, breath, and coordination, all working together to carry you forward. Gratitude arises for legs that move, for lungs that expand with effort, for the body's quiet resilience, even when there is stiffness or pain. Gratitude deepens as you notice how faithfully your body continues to serve you, step after step, without asking for recognition. Walking meditation turns motion into a form of appreciation, teaching you to honor the gift of embodiment itself. Each step also reminds you of interconnection. The earth beneath your feet is not inert, but alive, filled with history, rich with minerals from ancient mountains, layered with soil that once nourished forests, carrying within it the ashes of countless ancestors. Gratitude deepens when you realize you are not walking on dead matter, but on a living ground that has sustained beings for generations. Every step becomes a bridge across time, connecting you to the cycles of life and all who came before you. Walking meditation also reveals the miracle of balance. Each step is a subtle act of shifting weight, finding stability, and moving forward without falling. Gratitude grows when you recognize how this balance mirrors life itself. Just as you cannot freeze in one step, you cannot remain fixed in one moment. You must move, adjust, and trust the placement of the next. Gratitude arises for this lesson written in the body. Balance is not stillness, but continual adaptation, and the earth is always there to support you in the process. The practice also teaches patience. Walking slowly and deliberately is a challenge in a world driven by speed and urgency. Yet, as you slow down, gratitude deepens. You begin to see that the earth never hurries. It waits quietly for your step without expectation. Gratitude expands as you realize that life, too, does not need to be lived in constant haste. Peace is discovered not in racing forward, but in steady presence, in each unhurried breath and mindful step. Walking with awareness also strengthens your connection to the natural world. Each surface beneath your feet, grass, soil, sand, stone, offers a new teaching. Gratitude expands for the variety of the earth's textures, the cool touch of morning dew on grass, the warmth of sunlit pavement, the softness of moss, the firmness of rock. Each sensation becomes a reminder of the earth's generosity, offering countless experiences moment by moment. Gratitude becomes sensory, alive in touch, sound, and rhythm. This practice also reshapes your relationship with the environment. Walking mindfully, you begin to notice the fragility of the ground, soil eroded by misuse, paths worn down by overuse, ecosystems endangered by neglect. Gratitude arises not only for the gifts the earth provides, but also for the awareness that you must give back. Walking meditation becomes an act of stewardship, a vow to tread gently and to honor the ground that sustains all life. Walking slowly also brings clarity about impermanence. Each footprint you leave behind fades quickly, erased by wind, water, or the passage of time. Gratitude grows when you see that this impermanence mirrors your own life. Each step is unique, never to be repeated, disappearing even as it is made. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that this fleeting nature makes each step precious, each moment worthy of complete attention. Walking meditation further teaches equality. The earth does not discriminate. It supports all beings equally, whether rich or poor, strong or weak, human or animal. Gratitude arises when you recognize this impartial generosity. Each step becomes a reminder that you are part of a larger whole, sustained by a ground that gives itself freely, asking nothing in return. Gratitude flows as you begin to honor this deep equality, seeing yourself not as separate or above, but as one among many beings, all held and supported by the same earth. Walking meditation also transforms suffering. When your heart feels heavy, each slow, mindful step becomes a balm. The simple contact of your feet with the ground reminds you that you are never truly lost, never unsupported. Gratitude grows as you realize that the earth absorbs your weight and steadies you, even when life feels unstable. Walking turns into a way of releasing pain into the ground, trusting that you are carried through hardship. Gratitude deepens in this quiet exchange because the earth comforts without words, without judgment, and without condition. Walking with awareness also opens the senses in ways often missed in haste. You begin to notice birdsong in the trees, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the scent of soil, the touch of air against your skin. Gratitude arises for this symphony of life that greets you when you slow down enough to listen. Each step becomes an invitation to awaken, to thank not only the solid ground beneath your feet, but the entire environment surrounding you. Gratitude becomes embodied through sight, sound, smell, and touch, turning the practice into a full-bodied experience of presence. Walking meditation also teaches presence within community. When practiced with others, the footsteps begin to align, creating a shared rhythm of silence and awareness. Gratitude deepens as you feel this unspoken harmony, each person moving together, grounded in the same earth, breathing the same air. In such moments, gratitude is not only for the ground that carries you, but for the invisible thread of connection woven among people, a unity beyond words. This practice also reveals joy in simplicity. It requires no special tools, no elaborate rituals, only the body, the breath, and the ground beneath your feet. Gratitude arises for this simplicity, for the accessibility of such a practice, for the reminder that peace is always within reach. Walking meditation strips away complexity and returns you to what is essential, the profound truth that being alive and taking steps is already enough. Walking with gratitude also reshapes your view of the future. Each step is both progress and fulfillment, movement and arrival. You no longer need to rush toward distant goals, for every step already contains wholeness. Gratitude grows as you realize that you are already where you need to be. The journey itself becomes the destination, and the act of walking becomes an expression of completeness. Gratitude arises not for imagined destinations, but for the very unfolding of the path beneath your feet. When practiced deeply, walking meditation transforms your relationship with the world. The ground is no longer something to be overlooked, but something to be revered. Gratitude deepens until every step feels like a bow of respect, every step an offering of thanks. Walking becomes a prayer, not spoken in words, but embodied in contact, not enacted in ritual, but lived in presence. As this practice settles into your heart, you begin to see that gratitude is not reserved for what is visible or tangible. Beyond the solid ground beneath your feet, there are subtler gifts waiting, the silence that makes sound possible, the pauses that give life its rhythm, the noble quiet that deepens presence itself. The path, then, begins to extend beyond the ground that holds you into the silence that surrounds you, inviting you to discover gratitude in what is often overlooked, the absence of noise, the stillness between words, the quiet that nourishes life. Each mindful step teaches you that gratitude is not found in arrival, but in presence, not in destinations, but in the journey itself. With every movement, the earth continues to hold you, and the breath steadies you, reminding you of the quiet support that life endlessly provides. Yet beneath the footsteps and voices, beneath the rhythms of movement and sound, lies another gift often unnoticed. It is the gift of silence, not emptiness as lack, but silence as fullness, as nourishment, as a teacher of depth. In Buddhism, this is called noble silence. Silence is not merely the absence of noise, but the living presence of awareness itself. Gratitude deepens When you begin to recognize silence as a treasure that shapes the way you listen, the way you speak, and the way you are with yourself and others. Many people fear silence, filling it with chatter, distractions, or noise, mistaking it for loneliness or emptiness. Yet noble silence is different. It is a conscious turning inward, a deliberate choosing of stillness, not as a means of escape, but as a way of inhabiting presence fully. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to step into this space, realizing that silence is not empty at all. It is vibrant with clarity, expansive with space, and alive with possibility. In silence, you meet yourself without disguise. As the noise of the world fades, what remains is the steady rhythm of your breath, the unadorned truth of your thoughts, and the quiet essence of your being. Gratitude grows as you begin to see silence not as an enemy, but as a companion. It becomes a mirror, reflecting what lies hidden beneath sound. Sometimes what you encounter there is uncomfortable, and other times profoundly healing, but always real. Gratitude comes when you realize that silence offers the opportunity to know yourself more deeply than constant noise ever could. Noble silence also heightens your awareness of sound. When you rest in its embrace, even the subtlest noises grow vivid: the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Gratitude deepens because silence sharpens perception, reminding you that sound is not background, but gift. Words carry greater weight when they are born from silence, and music feels more powerful when it arises out of quiet. Gratitude emerges for the way silence gives sound its depth, transforming hearing into true listening. Silence transforms speech as well. The more time you spend in quiet, the more you realize how often words are unnecessary. The constant impulse to fill space softens, replaced by the wisdom of restraint. Gratitude grows as silence teaches you to speak with care, to use words not for their abundance, but for their sincerity. Speech becomes lighter, more deliberate, and kinder, carrying healing rather than harm. Gratitude arises for this discipline, for the way silence refines communication into something sacred and meaningful. Silence also deepens your connection with others. In everyday life, quiet moments in conversation can feel awkward, as though they must be quickly filled. But noble silence reveals a deeper truth. Presence alone is enough. Sitting with someone in quiet companionship can create intimacy stronger than dialogue. Gratitude grows when you discover this, when you feel that silence itself can carry love, respect, and understanding. It teaches that being with another person does not always require words. Sometimes the deepest gratitude is expressed in simply sharing stillness together. The practice of silence also heals the restless mind. In a world of constant noise, the mind is pulled outward, agitated, and scattered. But in silence, it begins to settle, like water clearing after being stirred. Gratitude arises as you feel this calm returning. In silence, weary thoughts find rest, clarity surfaces, creativity awakens, and peace emerges. Gratitude deepens because silence becomes medicine, always available, endlessly generous, and free of cost, waiting only for you to enter. Finally, silence reveals itself as a teacher of patience. Without the distractions of sound and movement, you are invited to sit with yourself, to remain present with boredom, discomfort, or unease. This discipline asks nothing but your willingness to stay, to endure without escape, and to soften into the moment. Gratitude grows when you recognize that this discipline strengthens you, teaching endurance and presence in ways that noise never can. Silence reveals that you do not need constant stimulation to feel alive. Gratitude arises for the strength that silence builds and for the resilience it quietly nurtures. Within noble silence, time itself feels transformed. Moments stretch and deepen, free from the urgency of constant activity. Gratitude grows as you realize that silence uncovers the abundance of time, showing that stillness is not wasted, but filled with richness. Each second becomes fuller, more complete, because it is experienced without interruption. Gratitude arises for this shift in pace, for the way silence restores your relationship with time itself. Silence also nurtures compassion. When the noise subsides, the subtle suffering of both yourself and others becomes clearer. Gratitude grows as you recognize that silence opens the heart, making space for tenderness. Words are not always necessary to heal, but presence always carries its own medicine. Noble silence teaches the art of offering presence without trying to fix, change, or explain. Gratitude arises for this gentle yet profound power, the ability to care deeply without relying on speech. The gift of noble silence also reshapes your relationship with the world. Walking in silence allows nature to speak with clarity. The forest feels more alive, the ocean more profound, the night sky infinitely vast. Gratitude arises when you discover that silence is not absence, but communion, a way of listening directly to life without interference. In quietude, you see more, hear more, and feel more. Gratitude deepens because silence reveals the sacredness that has always been present, but too often overlooked. Silence further teaches humility. In quiet, you recognize how much of life continues without your words or intervention. The sun rises, the rain falls, the earth turns, all without commentary or control. Gratitude arises when you realize that you are not the center of the universe, and silence returns you to harmony with what is greater than yourself. This humility humbles you, yet it frees you at the same time. Within the discipline of silence, freedom from judgment also emerges. Without the constant stream of words, you stop reinforcing rigid stories about yourself and others. Gratitude grows as you see how silence creates space for new possibilities and fresh ways of seeing. In silence, labels fall away, narratives dissolve, and you are no longer trapped in endless commentary. You simply are. Gratitude arises for this openness, for the way silence allows life to be fresh, alive, and unburdened. Silence also offers rest to relationships. While constant dialogue can become exhausting, shared silence has the power to refresh. Gratitude grows as you discover that silence itself can be the language of love, that sitting quietly with family or friends can express connection more profoundly than any words. In these moments, silence becomes gratitude embodied, a wordless way of saying, I am here with you. Noble silence also prepares the mind for wisdom. The teachings of life are subtle, easily drowned out by noise. In silence, however, you begin to hear them. Gratitude arises for the insights that surface only in stillness, the realization of impermanence, the clarity of interconnection, the awareness of what truly matters. Silence does not add more knowledge. Instead, it clears space for wisdom to arise naturally. Gratitude deepens because silence becomes the fertile ground for awakening. In its quiet simplicity, silence also teaches that presence is enough. You no longer need to prove your worth with endless explanations, achievements, or words. In silence, being itself is sufficient. Gratitude arises for this simplicity, for the relief of resting in presence, without performance or striving. Silence reminds you to value yourself not for what you produce or say, but simply for the miracle of being alive. This gratitude for silence expands into the fabric of daily life. You begin to treasure pauses in conversation, the stillness of quiet mornings, the spaces that exist between tasks. These gaps are no longer seen as emptiness to be filled, but as gifts to be honored. Gratitude grows as you learn to regard silence as nourishment, as essential to your spirit as food and water are to your body. Each pause becomes sacred, each quiet moment a reminder of life's depth and wholeness. As noble silence begins to settle in the heart, gratitude becomes more refined and subtle. You learn to give thanks, not only for what you hear, but also for what you do not hear, not only for what is present, but also for what is absent. Silence teaches that fullness cannot exist without emptiness, that sound gains its meaning through quiet, and that presence is enriched through stillness. Gratitude arises here not merely as a reaction to pleasant circumstances, but as a way of being rooted in the silent ground of awareness. From this foundation, the journey unfolds further. Having discovered gratitude in the depth of silence, you begin to recognize that every encounter, every person who crosses your path, carries within them a lesson. Silence reveals truths that words often conceal, and in the noble quiet of presence, you begin to feel the richness of simply being. When that awareness is carried into daily life, it uncovers something even more profound, the realization that every encounter is a teaching, and every person a messenger. Gratitude deepens when you see that no meeting is random, that each interaction, whether brief or long, tender or harsh, holds wisdom waiting to be received. This perspective dissolves the illusion of accidents. When someone speaks harshly, the natural impulse may be to respond with defensiveness or anger. But when you view them as a teacher, the question shifts. Instead of asking, "Why are they treating me this way?" you begin to wonder, "What can I learn here?" Gratitude arises because the sting of the encounter transforms into a mirror, showing you where patience, compassion, or humility still needs strengthening. In this way, the very encounter that once caused pain becomes a teacher of growth. Kind encounters, too, carry their own quiet teachings, though they are easier to overlook. A smile from a stranger, a generous gesture, a word of encouragement. These simple moments teach you about the strength of kindness and the power of small actions to ripple outward. Gratitude deepens when you recognize these encounters as reminders of how you yourself can become a source of light for others. Every act of kindness becomes a teacher, and gratitude flows more freely when you honor the lesson it offers. Some encounters go further, revealing your own limitations. A person may stir irritation, jealousy, or fear, not because of who they are, but because they touch something unresolved within you. Gratitude grows when you recognize this clearly. Rather than blaming them, you begin to see the opportunity they provide to turn inward, to face your own shadows, and to work with what lies hidden. Gratitude arises for their role in uncovering truths you might otherwise avoid, and for showing you the inner work still left to be done. Teachers also appear in those who challenge your perspectives. Meeting someone with beliefs, lifestyles, or experiences different from your own can expand your understanding of the world. Gratitude arises when you see that disagreement is not a threat, but an invitation to broaden your vision, to soften rigid thinking, and to glimpse life through another lens. Each encounter stretches awareness and reveals the vast diversity of human experience. The lesson here is humility, and gratitude deepens as you are reminded that your view is never the only one. Even brief encounters carry significance. A short conversation, a passing glance, a fleeting exchange can plant seeds that grow for years to come. Gratitude arises when you recognize that no encounter is too small to matter, that each one contributes to the shaping of your path, often in ways you only come to understand later. The barista who greets you warmly, the stranger who points you in the right direction, the child whose laughter rings out freely. Each one becomes a messenger in their own way, offering you a reminder of connection and of the countless ways life itself teaches through others. All encounters are teachers, each one showing you something about presence, about connection, about joy. Meeting those who are in pain carries profound lessons as well. To witness another's suffering is to be reminded of both the fragility and the resilience of life. Gratitude grows when you recognize that their pain awakens tenderness within you, expanding your capacity for empathy. Even when you cannot solve their problem, the encounter teaches you the quiet power of presence, the ability to stay with someone, to not turn away, to let them know they are not alone. Gratitude arises here for the chance to learn love in action, expressed not in fixing, but in simply being. Challenging encounters carry their own wisdom, often through the teaching of boundaries. Not every person will treat you with kindness or respect, and sometimes the lesson comes in learning to say no, to step back, to protect your well-being. Gratitude deepens when you realize that even those who cross your boundaries are teachers. The teaching is not in the harm they may bring, but in the clarity they give you about your own strength, your right to peace, and your need for self-respect. Gratitude arises not for the pain caused, but for the wisdom gained in standing firm within your truth. Each encounter also becomes a lesson in impermanence. People come and go, some appearing only for a brief moment, others staying for decades. Gratitude grows when you recognize that the temporary nature of these relationships makes them precious. You cannot hold anyone forever, but you can honor the lessons they bring while they are present. Every farewell is a teaching in letting go, every ending a reminder to treasure the time shared. Gratitude deepens when you see that impermanence is not only loss, but also a call to appreciate each moment of connection more fully. Encounters with elders carry wisdom forged by experience. Listening to their stories and receiving their perspectives teaches patience, endurance, and respect for the long unfolding of life. Gratitude arises when you see that their lessons are not abstract theories, but lived truths shaped by years of trial and triumph. Their presence reminds you that wisdom is something cultivated slowly, season by season, through resilience and reflection. Gratitude grows for the chance to learn from the richness of their journey. Children, in contrast, teach in a different way. Their openness, curiosity, and wholehearted presence are reminders of qualities you may have let slip away. Gratitude arises when their innocence rekindles your own capacity for wonder. Every question they ask, every burst of laughter, every moment of unfiltered honesty becomes a lesson in how to live without overcomplicating life. Gratitude deepens when you allow their simplicity and joy to soften your own perspective, reminding you of the beauty of living freshly in the present. Even enemies can be teachers. Those who oppose you, resist you, or stir discomfort in you often reveal the depth of your own attachments. They challenge you to practice compassion where it feels hardest. Gratitude arises when you begin to see that enemies are not merely obstacles, but opportunities to strengthen patience, forgiveness, and resilience. Without them, virtues would remain untested, and compassion would remain only an idea. Gratitude deepens because you realize that the very people you resist may be shaping your path in ways more profound than you first imagined. Animals, too, become teachers in their silent encounters. The effortless flight of a bird, the loyalty of a dog, the stillness of a cat, all offer lessons in simplicity, trust, and presence. Gratitude arises when you notice how much non-human beings mirror the truths of life. Their teachings require no words, yet they carry profound wisdom. Gratitude deepens for the reminder that the language of life is larger than human speech, and that wisdom is expressed in countless forms beyond your own. Encounters with nature itself are among the most enduring teachers. A storm teaches impermanence and power, reminding you of both vulnerability and awe. A mountain teaches endurance and steadiness, showing you how to stand firm amid changing conditions. A river teaches flow, revealing the wisdom of movement, letting go, and renewal. Gratitude arises when you recognize that every walk outdoors is an entrance into a vast classroom, where each element offers its own unique lesson. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the earth has always been teaching, waiting only for your willingness to listen. And then there are encounters with yourself. Looking in the mirror, sitting alone in solitude, or reflecting on your actions becomes its own form of meeting. These are meetings too, and gratitude grows when you realize that encounters with yourself may be among the most profound teachers of all. Looking inward reveals honesty, growth, and the deep need for compassion toward your own being. Gratitude deepens when you see that every reflection, whether it comes through solitude, self-inquiry, or simply pausing to notice your own patterns, is an opportunity to learn, to make adjustments, and to begin again with renewed clarity. Seeing each encounter as a teacher also transforms the way you view conflict. Instead of resenting difficulty, you start to approach it with curiosity, asking what it has to reveal. Gratitude arises when you notice that conflict brings hidden truths into the light. Truths about communication, values, insecurities, and fears. Gratitude deepens when you thank the conflict itself, not for the discomfort it brings, but for the lessons it uncovers, even as you work to resolve it with wisdom, compassion, and care. Gratitude also blossoms through encounters that inspire. Meeting someone who embodies compassion, resilience, clarity, or courage plants seeds of aspiration within your own heart. Their presence shows you what is possible and expands your vision of who you can become. Every inspiring figure is a teacher, not because they hand you answers, but because they awaken the potential already waiting inside you. Gratitude grows when you recognize that inspiration itself is a gift, nudging you toward greater depth and purpose. When you begin to see life in this way, gratitude becomes continuous. No encounter is wasted, no meeting is trivial. Each person, whether stranger, friend, elder, child, or adversary, becomes part of your journey, carrying a lesson you are meant to receive at that moment. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that life itself is the teacher, presenting its wisdom in the form of people, experiences, and relationships. Every encounter offers a mirror, a teaching, a reminder that the world is the greatest classroom, and that nothing, no matter how painful, fleeting, or joyful, is ever wasted. Even the most difficult meetings hold seeds of wisdom. Yet, as powerful as these lessons are, they point to an even deeper truth. You cannot hold on to them forever. Teachers appear and pass, relationships shift, experiences end, and moments fade into memory. Gratitude grows, not only through receiving, but also through releasing. To let go is to honor the impermanence of life, to thank what has served its purpose, and to create space for what is yet to come. Letting go is often misunderstood as loss or defeat. In reality, it is an act of liberation. When you release what no longer serves you, whether possessions, attachments, or expectations, you discover a profound freedom, and with that freedom, gratitude naturally arises. Gratitude for the space created, for the lightness of being, and for the clarity that comes when inner and outer clutter is removed. Possessions offer one of the clearest examples. The more you accumulate, the heavier the burden becomes. Every object demands care, attention, and protection. Letting go of excess reveals the truth that you never needed as much as you thought. Gratitude arises for the few belongings that remain, cherished not because of their abundance, but because of their sufficiency. A single cup, a trusted tool, a favorite book, each becomes precious when it is no longer drowned in a sea of unnecessary things. Gratitude deepens as you realize that true value lies not in quantity, but in simplicity and sufficiency. Letting go also extends to attachments, the invisible bonds of craving and clinging, whether to people, experiences, or identities. Attachments create suffering when you demand permanence from what is impermanent. To release attachment is not to stop loving or caring, but to stop grasping. Gratitude arises when love is freed from clinging, when you can value presence without needing possession. In that freedom, you learn to thank the moment, the person, or the experience for what it offers now, without burdening it with demands to last forever. Gratitude deepens as you see that freedom and love are not opposites, but companions that strengthen one another. Expectations form another heavy weight. Life rarely unfolds according to your plans, and the tighter you cling to them, the more disappointment and resistance you encounter. Letting go of rigid expectations opens you to reality as it is, not as you imagined it should be. Gratitude arises when you release the need to control every outcome and instead discover the beauty in what actually arrives. Instead of resenting the difference between what you wanted and what you received, you begin to thank life for surprising you. Each unexpected turn becomes a teacher of flexibility, an invitation to explore possibilities you had never imagined. Gratitude deepens when you shift your focus from disappointment to discovery, because every moment begins to feel like a gift rather than a test. Letting go reveals the lesson of impermanence in a direct and undeniable way. Everything you cling to will one day slip from your grasp. Possessions will decay, relationships will change. Even the body itself will fade. Gratitude grows when you accept this truth, not with despair, but with reverence. To let go is to honor the reality of change, to thank what has passed, and to trust that the space left behind is an opening for new beginnings. Gratitude deepens as you stop resisting the flow of life and instead allow yourself to move with it, lighter, freer, and more at peace. The act of letting go also brings profound peace to the mind. Holding on, whether to grudges, regrets, or unfulfilled desires, creates a constant undercurrent of tension. Release dissolves that strain and leaves room for calm. Gratitude arises for the relief that follows, for the space that opens in the mind once consumed by endless repetition of old stories. To forgive, to release resentment, to let past mistakes fall away, is to thank yourself for choosing peace over bitterness. Gratitude deepens as you come to see that letting go is not only an offering to others, but also a gift of healing to yourself. In the quiet that follows release, creativity awakens. When life is cluttered with attachments and possessions, inspiration struggles to find a place to land. Releasing creates space, and in that space new ideas, fresh insights, and unforeseen possibilities emerge. Gratitude grows as you recognize that emptiness is not a void, but fertile ground. Letting go of the old makes way for the new, and gratitude arises for the courage it takes to create that space. This practice of release also teaches humility. To let go is to acknowledge that you do not control everything, that life is larger and wiser than your carefully constructed plans. Gratitude arises when humility replaces pride, when you bow to the vastness of existence rather than resist it. Gratitude deepens because humility brings with it a lasting peace. dissolving the constant struggle to make life conform to your will. Letting go also refines relationships. When you release the urge to control others or mold them into your expectations, love becomes lighter, and gratitude arises for the spaciousness this brings to both you and them. Each person is allowed to be as they are, and you are freed from disappointment when they do not match your image of who they should be. Gratitude deepens when relationships are built upon presence rather than possession, upon acceptance rather than demand. The practice of letting go extends even to identity. Many cling tightly to roles, achievements, or labels, believing them to define who they are permanently. Yet, identities shift. What you do, how others perceive you, and even how you perceive yourself is in constant transformation. Letting go of rigid identity brings immense relief. Gratitude arises when you realize you are more than a single definition, that you are capable of change, adaptation, and growth. Gratitude deepens as you see that letting go of who you were makes room for who you are becoming. This release also applies to time. Many cling to the past, replaying regrets or longing for what has already passed, while others grasp at the future, anxious for what has not yet arrived. Letting go of both returns you to the present, the only place where gratitude can truly take root. Gratitude arises when you release the weight of what cannot be changed or predicted, and instead thank the present moment for what it offers. Gratitude deepens as you discover the fullness of life here, not elsewhere. Even spiritual practice requires letting go. Clinging to progress, to achievement, or to the idea of enlightenment itself becomes another source of suffering. Gratitude arises when you release the pressure to arrive at a final destination and instead honor the practice itself. Each breath, each step, each moment of awareness becomes enough. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the path is not about reaching some distant goal, but about being present, letting go again and again, moment by moment. In this way, letting go becomes its own teacher, not only of peace, freedom, and humility, but also of generosity. When you release possessions, you create new opportunities to share. Gratitude arises as you recognize that giving is not about loss, but about gain. The gain of lightness, the gain of connection, and the gain of supporting others. In giving, you do not diminish yourself, you expand. Gratitude deepens because generosity transforms both the giver and the receiver, reminding you that true abundance is not measured by what you hold on to, but by what you are willing to release. This practice of letting go and offering teaches that generosity is not a subtraction, but an expansion of joy, a widening of the heart, a flow that continues beyond you. This release also strengthens resilience. Life will inevitably bring moments where you are forced to let go through loss, change, or endings you did not choose. In those moments, you discover a strength you did not know lived within you. Gratitude arises for this resilience, for the unshakable part of yourself that endures even when the ground shifts beneath your feet. Gratitude deepens when you see that letting go does not break you. Instead, it remakes you, reshaping your spirit into someone more flexible, more open, and more alive. Every release becomes a sculptor, chiseling away unnecessary weight and leaving behind a truer, stronger self. Letting go also nurtures joy. Once the heavy burden of clinging is gone, life feels lighter, freer, and more open. Simple things bring delight precisely because they are not overshadowed by endless craving or restless wanting. Gratitude arises when you notice much easier it is to smile, how much more radiant ordinary moments become when you carry less. Joy blooms in the spaciousness that release provides. Gratitude deepens because you discover that happiness does not come from holding tightly, but from releasing gently, from allowing experiences to move through you like wind through an open window. Ultimately, letting go is an act of trust. It is trusting that life will bring what you truly need, trusting that endings are not only losses, but also openings for beginnings, trusting that emptiness is not barren, but fertile with possibility. Gratitude arises when you surrender to this trust, when you stop grasping for control and instead allow life to flow in its own rhythm. Gratitude deepens when you realize that in letting go you do not gain less, but more peace, more clarity, and more freedom. Letting go teaches that freedom is not found in holding on tightly, but in releasing gently and in trusting that the rhythm of life knows both the giving and the taking. When the weight of clinging falls away, a new kind of clarity emerges, a deeper appreciation for what remains. And among all the things that remain, none is more precious than the simple, extraordinary act of being alive. To wake up a morning is not ordinary, though it is often treated as such. It is a miracle, fragile and profound, so easily overlooked. Gratitude takes its purest form when you open your eyes and recognize the gift of another day, a gift denied to countless others. To awaken is not a guarantee, it is a grace. Each morning is an invitation to begin again. Waking up is often taken for granted, as though the body owes you another sunrise. But the truth is more delicate, more uncertain. Every night is a kind of surrender, a release into the unknown. Every morning is a renewal, a rebirth. Gratitude arises when you remember that life is never promised, that each awakening is a rare and unearned chance to breathe, to rise, to see the world again. These are not entitlements, they are privileges, and when you start your day with this awareness, the entire rhythm of life begins to shift. The Buddhist practice of acknowledging the rarity of life upon waking is simple, yet it is profound. Instead of rushing into tasks, distractions, or the weight of responsibilities, you pause, you recognize, with reverence, the miracle of survival. Gratitude grows in that pause, as you whisper inwardly, I have woken up, I have this day, I will live it with care. These words are not superstition, nor empty ritual, but a reminder that today is a treasure you may never hold again. This awareness reshapes mornings entirely. The first breath after waking becomes a source of wonder, a miracle in itself. The sunlight filtering through the window ceases to be ordinary and becomes a blessing. The solid touch of the floor beneath your feet is no longer unnoticed, but a grounding reminder of presence and support. Gratitude deepens as you awaken, not just from sleep, but to life itself, carrying the knowledge that every moment that follows is already more than you are owed, already a miracle unfolding in your hands. Gratitude deepens when you meet simple experiences not with indifference, but with reverence. To begin the day in this way is to frame everything that follows as a sacred gift. When waking is seen as a miracle, urgency softens. Life is no longer about racing through endless tasks, but about honoring what has been given. Gratitude arises when you recognize that simply being alive is enough, that everything else is secondary. Stress eases, replaced by presence. Life feels less like a burden to carry and more like a blessing to savor. This shift transforms difficulties, a problem at work, a disagreement, an inconvenience. They may still bring discomfort, but they no longer overshadow the miracle of waking. Gratitude arises because challenges are placed against the vast backdrop of life itself, and life itself remains precious. Relationships too are reshaped. When you wake knowing the day's fragility, you treat others with tenderness. Gratitude grows when you greet loved ones with the awareness that this moment with them may never return. A simple good morning becomes more than words. It becomes an acknowledgement of shared existence in fleeting time. Time itself is seen differently. The day is no longer a blur of hours to be filled, but a series of unrepeatable moments. Gratitude arises when you notice the uniqueness of the morning breeze, the taste of breakfast, the sound of birdsong. Gratitude deepens when you realize life's richness is found not in accumulation, but in presence. This awareness also strengthens resilience. When life is framed as a rare gift, setbacks lose some of their weight. Gratitude arises because even in difficulty, you are still breathing, still capable of growth. Survival itself becomes a quiet victory. Each awakening grants you another chance to begin again. Humility is nurtured too. Waking is not your achievement, but a gift beyond control. Gratitude arises when you see that every day is borrowed, every breath on loan from the universe. This humility softens pride and deepens reverence. With humility comes purpose. If today may be your last, you naturally ask, how will I live it? Gratitude arises when this question sharpens your priorities, guiding you toward kindness, presence, and meaning. Each morning becomes an invitation not merely to exist, but to live deliberately. Compassion also flows from this practice. When you recognize the rarity of waking, you see that others too walk this fragile path. Gratitude arises when you look at another person and remember they too have been given this day. They too carry this fragile gift. Gratitude deepens when this awareness shapes how you treat others with patience and care. Finally, waking reminds you of interconnection. You are alive not by yourself, but because of countless conditions. The air you breathe, the heart that beats, the world that sustains you. Gratitude arises when you see that waking is not only your miracle, but the result of the entire universe working together. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to the web of life that makes each morning possible. This awareness softens regret. Waking with gratitude, you remember that today is unshaped, unspoiled, not bound to the past. Gratitude arises because you are free to live differently now. Gratitude deepens when you see that every morning offers renewal, a chance to practice again, to love again, to begin again. This practice also teaches presence with mortality. Each morning carries the reminder that one day you will not wake, that life is finite. Gratitude arises when you hold this truth, not with fear, but with reverence. Gratitude deepens when mortality sharpens appreciation, making every day more vivid, every encounter more sacred, every breath more worthy of thanks. When waking is treated as a miracle, even the smallest things glow: the warmth of water on your face, the stretch of your body, the quiet of early hours, all become blessings. Gratitude arises when you stop treating mornings as obstacles to endure and start honoring them as sacred beginnings. Gratitude deepens when you see that these ordinary details are extraordinary in their own right. Waking with awareness also nurtures discipline. Beginning the day with gratitude sets a tone of reverence that ripples into work, relationships, and rest. Gratitude arises when you see that discipline is not a burden, but a devotion, a way of honoring the gift of another day. Gratitude deepens when you realize that peace comes not from comparison or craving, but from being satisfied with the simple miracle of being alive. No achievement, possession, or status can equal the first gift, waking itself. Each morning is a reminder that life is temporary, fragile, and rare. Gratitude grows when you begin the day not with complaint, but with reverence. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that waking is the foundation of joy, the root worm which all other blessings grow. To wake each morning, as though it were the rarest of miracles, changes everything. You rise with reverence, aware that life has been granted once again, aware that this chance is not guaranteed. From this deep gratitude, the heart naturally expands beyond itself. It is not enough to simply be alive. There is a call to use this life well. From that awareness arises one of the most beautiful expressions of Buddhist practice, the Bodhisattva ideal, to live not only for personal freedom, but for the awakening of all beings. To see service itself as the highest form of gratitude is to embody a joy no self-centered pursuit can offer. The Bodhisattva path is rooted in gratitude for existence, but it is expressed through service. Instead of hoarding wisdom, you share it. Instead of striving only for your own release from suffering, you vow to walk alongside others, supporting their journey as if it were your own. Gratitude arises when you recognize that the ability to serve is itself a privilege, that to be in a position to help even one being is to be entrusted with something sacred. Service on this path is not about grand gestures or recognition. It is about presence, patience, and compassion in the smallest acts, listening without judgment, offering kindness where it is needed. In this way, gratitude ripens into service, and service becomes the living expression of gratitude. Giving time to someone in distress, listening with patience, offering a gentle word, these are the everyday forms of the bodhicitta spirit. Gratitude deepens when you see that no act of service is wasted. Even the simplest gesture can ease suffering and ripple outward in ways you may never know. The Bodhisattva ideal also teaches that service is not a burden, but a joy. Gratitude arises when you discover that helping others nourishes your own heart, that compassion gives energy rather than depletes it. In serving, you are reminded of interconnection, that others' happiness is tied to your own, that their relief from suffering lightens the world for everyone. Gratitude deepens when you see that service is not sacrifice, but participation in the great web of life. To walk this path requires humility. The Bodhisattva does not serve from superiority, but from shared humanity. Gratitude arises when you remember that you too have been carried by countless others, the teachers who guided you, the strangers who helped you, the earth itself sustaining you. Service becomes not an obligation, but a way of honoring a debt that can never truly be repaid. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to this cycle of giving and receiving, knowing that by serving others, you honor all that has been given to you. The Bodhisattva ideal also reframes difficulty. When someone is unkind, instead of responding with resentment, you see an opportunity to practice patience and compassion. Gratitude arises when you realize that even those who challenge you offer a chance to strengthen your practice. The gratitude is not for the harm itself, but for the wisdom it allows you to cultivate. Service then extends even to those who oppose you, because you understand they too are suffering, and your role is to ease, not to judge. This path also teaches the value of perseverance. The Bodhisattva vow is vast, to serve all beings across endless time. Gratitude arises when you see that the vow is not meant to be completed, but to keep the heart open. The joy is not in finishing, but in continuing, dedicating each step to something larger than yourself. Gratitude deepens when you realize that endless service is not exhausting, but liberating, because it frees you from the narrow confines of self-concern. Service also transforms your relationship with purpose. Many search endlessly for meaning, but the Bodhisattva knows that purpose is found in service itself. Gratitude arises when you realize you do not need to wait for grand opportunities to matter. Each interaction is already an opportunity to serve. Gratitude deepens when you live with this awareness, when each moment becomes meaningful simply because it allows you to offer kindness. The Bodhisattva ideal also reveals that gratitude for life cannot be separated from responsibility. To be alive while others suffer is to be called to respond. Gratitude arises not only in enjoying your blessings, but in using them to uplift others. Gratitude deepens when you realize that privilege is not something to cling to, but something to share, that joy multiplies when it is spread. This path also reshapes how you view your own suffering. Instead of seeing pain as something to escape alone, you recognize it as a bridge to others. Gratitude arises when you see that your hardships make you more compassionate, more capable of understanding the struggles of those around you. Gratitude deepens when you realize that service is not about being perfect, but about being real, about using even your wounds as sources of connection and healing. The Bodhisattva way also teaches the beauty of anonymity, to serve without recognition, to give without expectation of thanks, is to embody pure compassion. Gratitude arises when you experience the quiet joy of helping unseen, when you realize that the act itself is its own reward. Gratitude deepens when you free yourself from the need for acknowledgement, finding fulfillment in the giving itself. Walking this path also transforms fear. The Bodhisattva does not fear suffering or death, because service gives life a depth beyond individual survival. Gratitude arises when you see that to live for others is to transcend fear, to anchor your existence in something enduring. Gratitude deepens when you realize that your actions continue through others, that service leaves traces beyond your own lifetime. The practice also cultivates boundless compassion. Gratitude arises when you recognize that every being, no matter how lost or broken, has Buddha nature, the potential for awakening. Gratitude deepens when you realize that by serving others, you are honoring that potential, watering seeds that may bloom far beyond your sight. The Bodhisattva ideal also reminds you that service is not about perfection, but sincerity. Gratitude arises when you realize that you do not need to solve all problems to serve. You only need to show up with presence and care. Gratitude deepens when you release the pressure of saving the world and embrace the joy of helping in the ways you can, here and now. In practicing this ideal, you begin to see that gratitude itself becomes service. A grateful heart radiates kindness, patience, and generosity. To live with gratitude is to serve without effort, because gratitude naturally flows outward in care for others. Gratitude deepens when you see that your very way of being can become a gift to the world. Serving others with a grateful heart opens life in ways self-interest never can. When you live to uplift, your days carry meaning far beyond personal gain. Yet, even the most devoted service is shaped by a truth that none can avoid. Time is finite. However much compassion you cultivate, however much wisdom you share, there will come a morning you do not rise. This is not a cause for despair, but a call to live more fully, to honor every breath, every encounter, every act, as if it were your last. In Buddha's teaching, this awareness is called maranasati, the contemplation of death. To reflect on mortality is not to invite fear, but to awaken gratitude for this very day, this borrowed span of hours placed in your hands. Awareness of death strips away illusion. So often, people live as though tomorrow is guaranteed, as though life stretches endlessly before them. Plans are made, time is wasted, gratitude postponed, but death reminds you that the only day you can touch is today. Gratitude arises when you recognize that this day is not owed to you, that to wake and move through it is a privilege. Gratitude deepens when you see that this borrowed day demands presence, not distraction. Contemplating death sharpens priority. Many of the things that seem urgent, status, possessions, trivial arguments, fade in significance when viewed against mortality. What remains are the essentials: kindness, love, awareness, service. Gratitude arises when you realize that death clarifies what matters, teaching you not to squander time on what does not nourish. Gratitude deepens when you live each day aligned with values that will still matter on your last breath. This practice also brings tenderness to relationships. Awareness of death reminds you that every meeting could be the final one, every conversation the last. Gratitude arises when you approach others with this awareness, treating each word as precious, each moment together as sacred. Gratitude deepens when you no longer take loved ones for granted, when farewells are softened with care, when anger dissolves because you know the chance to love is fleeting. Maranasati also softens fear of death itself. By contemplating mortality daily, death becomes less of a shock and more of a companion. Gratitude arises when you realize that this reflection frees you from the constant anxiety of avoid. Gratitude deepens when you discover that thinking of death makes life richer, not poorer, because it anchors you in what is real. Awareness of death also teaches humility. No matter your accomplishments, death will level them. Gratitude arises when you see this not as negation, but as balance. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that death places all beings on equal ground, reminding you to live not with arrogance but with reverence. This reflection also strengthens compassion. When you remember that others too are mortal, you meet their struggles with gentleness. Gratitude arises when you realize that everyone shares the same fragility, the same uncertainty. Gratitude deepens when compassion flows more easily, when you no longer waste time in harshness, but instead use your days to ease the burden of others. Contemplating death also enhances presence. Each sight, sound, and breath take on a heightened clarity when you know it may be the last. Gratitude arises when you notice the beauty of a single sunrise, the taste of food, the warmth of touch. Gratitude deepens when these ordinary moments are no longer dismissed, but treasured as the very essence of life. Maranasati also cultivates resilience. When challenges arise, awareness of death puts them into perspective. Gratitude arises when you see that many worries shrink when measured against mortality. Gratitude deepens when you find strength in knowing that if this is your last day, you would rather meet it with courage than with complaint. The contemplation of death also teaches acceptance. Life ends whether you resist or not. Gratitude arises when you release the struggle to deny it, when you bow to impermanence as part of the natural order. Gratitude deepens when acceptance brings peace, allowing you to live with more ease, knowing that nothing is permanent, but that every moment can be honored. Maranasati sharpens your relationship with time. Every hour becomes meaningful, every choice more deliberate. Gratitude arises when you recognize that life is not measured in years, but in present. Gratitude deepens when you no longer delay gratitude for another day, but cultivate it now, in this breath, in this moment. The practice also nurtures joy. Far from being morbid, awareness of death illuminates the sweetness of life. Gratitude arises when you see that fragility makes everything more precious. The laughter of a child, the quiet of evening, the chance to serve. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the beauty of life is inseparable from its impermanence, that transience is what gives it meaning. Maranasati also teaches liberation from clinging. Death will strip away all possessions, roles, and identities. Gratitude arises when you see this not as loss, but as a reminder to let go now, to travel lightly while you still can. Gratitude deepens when you learn to live with less attachment, with more freedom, and with a greater appreciation for what is here in the present. This practice also inspires service, knowing that time is short. You are moved to use it wisely, to contribute rather than consume. Gratitude arises when you see each day as a chance to give, to lighten another's load, to plant seeds that may flourish after you are gone. Gratitude deepens when you realize that service is one of the few legacies that death cannot erase. Awareness of death also transforms how you view endings. Each sunset, each farewell, each completed task becomes a small rehearsal for the final release. Gratitude arises when you begin to honor endings as sacred rather than as failures. Gratitude deepens when you see that endings create space for renewal, just as death itself creates space for life to continue. By practicing Maranasati, you live more awake. Gratitude arises when you remember that this day is borrowed, that it could vanish without notice. Gratitude deepens when you live each moment as if it were both the first and the last, with reverence, with presence, with love. Reflecting on death brings clarity to the present, showing that every day is borrowed and therefore precious. To wake with this knowledge is to live more deeply, to love more urgently, to waste less time on what does not matter. Yet gratitude does not belong only to the present moment or to the awareness of life's brevity. It also reaches backward into the story that has carried you to this point. Every struggle, every mistake, every triumph has shaped the person who now stands here. Gratitude deepens when you learn to bow to the past, not to cling to it, not to resent it, but to thank it for shaping today's self. The past often feels like a burden. Regrets, losses, and pain leave scars that are difficult to accept. Yet when you look closer, even the hardest experiences contain lessons that changed you, strengths you would not have developed otherwise. Gratitude arises when you see that your wounds made you tender, your failures taught resilience, and your heartbreaks opened compassion. Gratitude deepens when you stop cursing the past for its difficulties and instead thank it for the wisdom those difficulties brought. Mistakes are often the hardest to embrace. They linger in memory, replayed with shame or guilt. Yet mistakes are teachers that no book or lecture could replace. Each wrong turn revealed something about yourself, about your choices, about life's direction. Gratitude grows when you realize that your current clarity was born from those errors, and that without them you might still be blind to certain truths. Gratitude deepens when you see mistakes not as stains but as stepping stones, as part of the path that made you wiser. Struggles, too, become sources of gratitude. The times you thought you would break but somehow endured, the nights you felt lost but still rose in the morning, these shaped a resilience you now carry. Gratitude arises when you see that those seasons of hardship taught your patience, humility, and strength. Gratitude deepens when you understand that suffering was not meaningless, but formative, giving you the depth to meet life with compassion for yourself and for others. Triumphs, on the other hand, are easier to thank, but no less important to honor. Every success, every victory, every moment of joy built confidence and gave you reason to continue. Gratitude arises when you look back and see how far you have come, how many challenges you have already faced and overcome. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that triumphs remind you of your capacity to grow, to create, to achieve, and to live with purpose. Even seemingly ordinary moments of the past have shaped you. Conversations, friendships, books, and places, all of them left imprints that quietly guided your unfolding. Gratitude grows when you realize that the person you are today is not separate from these influences, that every moment, no matter how small, contributed to the whole of your becoming. Gratitude deepens when you see that nothing was wasted, that even the simplest encounters held meaning in the larger story of your life. Thanking the past also teaches forgiveness. Gratitude arises when you soften toward your younger self, the one who acted with limited understanding but did the best possible at the time. Gratitude deepens when forgiveness replaces judgment, when you can look back and say thank you for trying, even when you failed. This shift transforms regret into compassion, allowing gratitude to flow even for the parts of your history you once rejected. The past also connects you to lineage, ancestors, teachers, and those who came before, all shaped the conditions of your life. Gratitude arises when you remember that your path is not yours alone, but built on countless lives lived before you. Gratitude deepens when you honor their struggles and recognize that without their endurance, you would not be here. Thanking the past becomes not only personal, but collective, an acknowledgement of the great web of lives that carried you forward. This practice also dissolves resentment. Gratitude arises when you see that even those who hurt you, even those who opposed you, in their own way shaped your growth. Gratitude deepens when you understand that their role, though painful, contributed to your wisdom and resilience. Thanking the past does not mean condoning harm, but it does mean recognizing the lessons suffering left behind. Thanking the past also strengthens resilience for the future. Gratitude arises when you look back and see how much you have already survived. Gratitude deepens when you realize that those experiences prepared you for what is to come. The past becomes a reservoir of courage, reminding you that if you endured before, you can endure again. This practice also enriches joy. Gratitude arises when you recall the moments of laughter, connection, and love that carried you through hard times. Gratitude deepens when you see that joy was always present, even in difficult seasons, and that these moments of light sustained you. Thanking the past for joy teaches you to notice and honor joy more fully in the present. By thanking the past, you also free yourself from clinging. Gratitude arises when you appreciate what has been without demanding that it return. Gratitude deepens when you release nostalgia and instead hold memories as gifts, complete in themselves. This freedom allows you to move forward without chains, carrying gratitude rather than longing. The practice also cultivates humility. Gratitude arises when you admit that you are not self-made, that your life was shaped by countless conditions beyond your control. Gratitude deepens when you bow to the complexity of causes that formed you, recognizing that every chapter of your past, whether chosen or not, contributed to the self who lives today. Thanking the past also teaches presence. Gratitude arises when you see that the past has already given its gifts, and that today is where those gifts are meant to be lived. Gratitude deepens when you stop reliving old stories and instead honor them by embodying their lessons. Here and now, the past becomes not a prison but a foundation, steadying you in the present. This reflection also fosters compassion for others. Gratitude arises when you recognize that everyone carries a past filled with struggles, mistakes, and triumphs. Gratitude deepens when you hold this truth gently, realizing that just as you have been shaped by your journey, so too has every person you meet been formed by theirs. Gratitude deepens when you treat others with the same compassion you have learned to give yourself, honoring their journeys as worthy of respect and understanding. Thanking the past also reshapes how you see time. Gratitude arises when you begin to understand that life is a continuum, each moment shaping the next in an unbroken chain. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the present is not separate from the past, but rather it's flowering. Every joy, every sorrow, and every lesson bloom into now. Gratitude flows when you recognize that none of it was wasted, that even the chapters you wished away carried seeds of wisdom. To thank the past is to honor life in its entirety. Gratitude arises when you bow to every moment that brought you here, embracing even the parts you once longed to erase. Gratitude deepens when you see that nothing could be left out, that the whole of your history shaped the whole of who you are today. Thanking the past allows you to see how every struggle, mistake, and triumph carved the ground beneath your feet. Gratitude blooms when you embrace those chapters, not as chains to hold you back, but as roots that gave you strength. Yet if gratitude for the past steadies you, there is another step that frees you even more fully, the practice of meeting life as though for the first time. This is Shoshin, the beginner's mind. To live with beginner's mind is to release the burden of old judgments and fixed ideas, to look at each experience with openness and curiosity. Gratitude deepens when you stop expecting life to repeat itself and instead allow it to unfold fresh in every moment. Beginner's mind teaches that knowledge, while useful, can sometimes narrow your vision. The more you think you already know, the less you truly see. Gratitude arises when you let go of rigid certainty and open yourself to wonder. Gratitude deepens again when you realize that every sunrise, though familiar, is still new. Every conversation, even with the same person, is different. Every breath, though countless, is unrepeatable. The beginner's mind transforms routine into miracle. This practice is not about forgetting the past, but about refusing to be imprisoned by it. Gratitude arises when you release the weight of past disappointments, allowing yourself to meet the present without the shadow of old pain. Gratitude deepens when you stop comparing today to yesterday and instead receive it as unique. Each moment becomes worthy of thanks, simply because it has never happened before and will never happen again. Shoshin also teaches humility. To adopt a beginner's mind is to admit you do not have all the answers, that life is bigger than your understanding. Gratitude arises when you bow to this vastness, when you let yourself be a student of the world. Gratitude deepens when humility frees you from arrogance, opening the heart to constant learning. Every person becomes a teacher, every situation a classroom, and gratitude flows naturally because the world itself is alive with lessons. This mindset also renews joy. Familiarity often dulls appreciation, causing you to overlook what surrounds you because you believe you already know it. But with beginner's mind, you rediscover the texture of food, the sound of rain, the smile of a friend. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to be surprised again, when you see the ordinary with fresh eyes. Gratitude deepens when joy emerges, not from novelty, but from the rediscovery of what has been there all along. Shoshin is especially powerful in relationships. When you believe you already know someone completely, you stop listening fully, stop noticing the subtle ways they change. Gratitude arises when you meet even the most familiar person with openness, acknowledging that they too are new in each moment, just as you are. Gratitude deepens when relationships are renewed daily, free from the weight of assumptions. Every conversation becomes an act of discovery, and every gesture a chance to learn something new. This practice also teaches patience, for beginner's mind accepts not knowing as part of the path. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to rest in uncertainty, trusting that understanding will unfold in its own time. Gratitude deepens when you see that life's richness is not found in rushing to answers, but in being present with the questions. Adopting beginner's mind also transforms failure. Instead of viewing mistakes as final judgments, you begin to see them as opportunities to start again. Gratitude arises when you embrace failure as a teacher rather than an enemy. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every attempt carries value and that every effort moves you closer to wisdom, even when the outcome does not align with expectation. Shoshin also sharpens awareness of impermanence. Each moment is fleeting, and beginner's mind honors this truth by treating each one as precious. Gratitude arises when you recognize the fragility of now. Gratitude deepens when you live with attentiveness, savoring each experience without clinging, knowing that it too will pass. This practice also frees you from the trap of comparison. Beginner's mind does not measure today against yesterday, nor yourself against others. Gratitude arises when you release the constant habit of ranking and instead rest fully in presence. Gratitude deepens when you discover contentment, not in being better, but in simply being awake to what is here. Beginner's mind also fosters creativity. When the mind is not bound by rigid categories or old habits, new possibilities open. Gratitude arises when you encounter the freshness of imagination and allow playfulness to return. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that creativity is not limited to art, but is woven into every choice, every perspective, and every way of meeting life with openness. In this way, Shoshin deepens compassion as well. When you let go of labels and judgments, you begin to see people as they are rather than as you assume them to be. Gratitude arises when you notice the humanity of each person more clearly. Gratitude deepens when compassion flows naturally from this clarity, when you respond to others not with preconceptions, but with genuine presence. This practice also teaches freedom from pride. Knowledge and experience can create walls that separate you from others, but beginner's mind gently breaks those walls down. Gratitude arises when you release the need to always be the expert, to always be right. Gratitude deepens when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to ask questions, and to remain open. Such openness creates space for deeper connection and genuine growth. Shoshin also reveals the abundance of life. When you meet each experience as new, you realize that the world is filled with infinite variety. Gratitude arises when you stop dismissing life as repetitive and instead see its endless depth. Gratitude deepens when every day feels like discovery and every moment feels like a gift. Finally, this practice nurtures resilience. Beginner's mind embraces change without resistance because it does not cling to fixed ideas. Gratitude arises when you see that flexibility is strength and that it allows you to adapt to life's shifts with greater ease. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that openness to change makes you not weaker, but more resilient, enabling you to meet life with both courage and grace. Gratitude deepens when you realize that resilience is not about force, but about openness, about meeting each change as an opportunity rather than a threat. In daily life, beginner's mind turns ordinary routines into sacred practices. Walking becomes gratitude for movement, eating becomes gratitude for nourishment, listening becomes gratitude for connection. Gratitude arises when you notice that even the simplest things are new. Gratitude deepens when you see that beginner's mind transforms not by adding more to life, but by helping you see what was already there. Ultimately, Shoshin reminds you that life itself is always unfolding, always fresh, always offering chances to begin again. Gratitude arises when you stop treating life as predictable and instead welcome its surprises. Gratitude deepens when you live not as someone who has already arrived, but as someone always learning, always growing, always starting anew. Approaching life with beginner's mind opens the door to wonder. You begin to see the world not as something already known, but as something endlessly alive and surprising. And once the mind is softened in this way, gratitude no longer belongs only to grand experiences or rare moments of joy, It begins to flow into the simplest details of existence. The sunlight filtering through a window, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of laughter, the stillness of silence. Each becomes a gift. Gratitude arises when you learn to notice these ordinary sights and sounds. Gratitude deepens into a way of being when you realize that life reveals its beauty not only in extraordinary moments, but in the countless small miracles that sustain you every single day. Sunlight is one of the simplest gifts, yet it is so often ignored. It spills across the earth without demand, nourishing plants, warming skin, and marking the rhythm of time. Gratitude arises when you pause to notice its presence, the way it paints the morning sky, the way it shifts through the hours, the way it makes life itself possible. Gratitude deepens when you realize that without sunlight, nothing could grow, no breath could be taken, and no joy could unfold. To see sunlight not as background, but as blessing, is to live in continual thankfulness. Rain is another teacher of gratitude. For some, it is an inconvenience, but with awareness it becomes a miracle. Each drop carries the gift of renewal, nourishing soil, filling rivers, and quenching thirst. Gratitude arises when you hear the rhythm of rain on leaves, on rooftops, on the earth, recognizing it as the sound of life replenishing itself. Gratitude deepens when you see that rain is not an interruption, but generosity falling freely, asking nothing in return. Even the greyest days reveal abundance when you learn to thank the rain. Laughter, too, is often overlooked. It rises suddenly, unplanned, and dissolves tension in an instant. Gratitude arises when you recognize laughter as medicine, a reminder of lightness even in difficulty. Gratitude deepens when you cherish the shared joy it creates, the way it connects hearts without any need for explanation. Each burst of laughter is proof that even in a world of suffering, joy still finds its way through. To thank laughter is to thank the resilience of the human spirit, the spark that refuses to be extinguished, even in darkness. Silence, though less obvious, is no less miraculous. It frames sound, gives meaning to words, and provides rest for the mind. Gratitude arises when you recognize that silence is not emptiness, but fullness, a space where awareness expands. Gratitude deepens when you learn to rest in it, to value its depth as much as noise. Without silence, there would be no music, no clarity, no peace. Gratitude grows when you begin to see silence as a living presence, always available, always nourishing, a quiet companion that softens the heart. Ordinary sights too reveal abundance, the colors of leaves changing with the seasons, the patterns of clouds drifting across the sky, the flicker of candlelight in the evening, all are miracles, often passed by unnoticed. Gratitude arises when you pause to truly see, when you let your eyes rest long enough for beauty to reveal Ivazil. Gratitude deepens when you realize that wonder is not hidden, but overlooked, that the world is always offering beauty to those who are willing to look. The same is true of ordinary sounds. The rustling of trees, the hum of bees, the flow of water, even the rhythm of footsteps, all carry the music of life. Gratitude arises when you listen with care, when you stop treating these sounds as background and start honoring them as reminders of connection. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every sound is fleeting, unique to that moment, never to be heard in the same way again. Each one is worthy of thanks. Even the breath itself carries its own sound, soft and subtle, reminding you of life's continuity. Gratitude arises when you hear this rhythm, steady and quiet, sustaining you without demand. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this sound will one day cease, making every breath now an irreplaceable gift. To thank the sound of breath is to thank life itself, rising and falling with each inhale and exhale, a song too easily forgotten until it is nearly gone. Ordinary encounters also hold beauty. The sound of footsteps in a hallway, the sight of neighbors passing by, the murmur of conversation in a cafe, all are pieces of a larger symphony of human life. Gratitude arises when you see these as signs of connection, of community, of shared existence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that these sights and sounds mean you are not alone, that you are part of a world alive with movement and interaction. Even the most mundane details, the clinking of dishes, the turning of pages, the creak of a chair, become sacred when viewed with gratitude. Each is a reminder of being alive, of interacting with a world that responds and speaks back in countless small ways. Gratitude arises when you honor these simple exchanges. Gratitude deepens when you understand that life is built not of rare events, but of countless small moments, each carrying beauty if only you pay attention. Seeing beauty in ordinary sights and sounds also teaches patience. Gratitude arises when you slow down enough to notice the play of light, the texture of fabric, the rhythm of a bird's call. Gratitude deepens when you realize that life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Presence reveals that the extraordinary is already here, woven into the ordinary. This practice also teaches humility. Gratitude arises when you realize that the world offers endless gifts without your effort. The sunrise, the rain, the laughter of others. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to this generosity, recognizing that much of what sustains you is given freely, without condition. Gratitude for ordinary sights and sounds also transforms suffering. Even in difficulty, you can find moments of light, a warm patch of sunlight on your skin, the sound of wind moving through trees, a child's laughter breaking tension. Gratitude arises when you allow these moments to soothe you, to remind you that beauty persists even in hardship. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that life always carries both struggle and wonder, and that noticing the wonder sustains you through the struggle. By honoring ordinary sights and sounds, you begin to live more fully. Gratitude arises when you stop rushing past the details and start resting in them. Gratitude deepens when every day feels rich, not because of grand events, but because of the depth you bring to simple moments. Noticing beauty in the ordinary softens the heart, teaching you that life's treasures are not hidden in faraway places, but present in every sight, every sound, every fleeting moment. Yet gratitude can go even deeper, reaching into the very nature of who you believe you are, for beneath the ordinary lies the most profound of Buddhist insights, anatta, the truth of non-self. To realize non-self is to see that the I you cling to is not fixed or permanent, but a flowing constellation of causes and conditions. Gratitude arises not from defending the ego, but from releasing it, from awakening to the freedom that comes when the walls of separateness dissolve. The idea of self feels solid. You grow up with a name, a body, a story. It becomes easy to believe that this collection is permanent, unchanging, yet when examined closely, none of it is fixed. The body is constantly renewing itself. The mind is always shifting. Even your identity evolves through time. Gratitude arises when you realize that you are not trapped in one rigid definition. Gratitude deepens when you see that non-self is not erasure, but liberation, giving you the freedom to change, to grow, to be more than the roles and labels you once clung to. This realization also dissolves the burden of ego. Much of suffering comes from defending the idea of me, my pride, my status, my possessions. When you begin to see that this me is not solid, gratitude arises because the struggle softens. Gratitude deepens when you discover that without the constant weight of ego, life feels lighter, more open. You no longer need to prove yourself endlessly, because there is no fixed self to protect. Non-self also awakens compassion. When the walls between me and you soften, gratitude arises for the interconnectedness of life. Gratitude deepens when you realize that others are not separate from you, but part of the same flowing web of existence. Their suffering is not alien, but shared. Their joy is not distant, but resonant. Gratitude grows when you see that caring for others is not a duty, but a recognition that their life and your life are inseparable. Realizing non-self also changes how you view mistakes. When you believe in a solid self, failures feel like permanent stains on who you are. But with non-self, you see that no single act defines you, that identity itself is fluid. Gratitude arises when you release the weight of past errors. Gratitude deepens when you see mistakes as part of the stream of conditions, moments that teach without condemning. You thank them for shaping growth, but you do not cling to them as unchangeable truths. This insight also transforms your relationship with possessions. The ego clings to objects as extensions of self. My car, my home, my things. But when self is seen as empty, the hold weakens. Gratitude arises when you realize possessions are not who you are, and that you can live with less without losing yourself. Gratitude deepens when you see that freedom from ownership allows you to appreciate objects for their function and beauty without letting them define you. Non-self also teaches humility. The idea of "I did this, I achieved this," is softened when you see that everything arises from countless conditions. Your successes are not yours alone, but the result of teachers, parents, communities, and even the elements of nature that sustained you. Gratitude arises when you bow to this truth, recognizing the vast network of support that makes life possible. Gratitude deepens when humility becomes natural, when you thank not only people, but the whole universe for your very being. This perspective also eases conflict. Many arguments arise from clashing egos, each defending its identity. Realizing non-self softens the need to win, the need to prove. Gratitude arises when you let go of defending "I" and instead listen with openness. Gratitude deepens when conflicts transform into opportunities for understanding, when relationships heal through humility rather than pride. Non-self also changes how you view impermanence. When you cling to a fixed self, aging and death feel terrifying, as if something solid is being destroyed. But when you see that the self was never solid to begin with, gratitude arises for the flow of life. Gratitude deepens when you accept aging as transformation, death as return, and each stage of existence as part of a larger unfolding. This realization also enhances joy in the present, without the heavy burden of "I" and "mine." You meet experiences more freely. Gratitude arises when you savor without clinging, love without possession, and act without demand for recognition. Gratitude deepens when joy is found not in ownership, but in participation, in simply being part of life's flow. Non-self also dissolves comparison. The ego constantly measures, am I better, worse, greater, smaller? But with non-self, these comparisons lose their grip. Gratitude arises when you release the need to compete. Say, when you stop binding your worth to the paths of others. Gratitude deepens as you learn to appreciate your own journey as unique, an expression of countless conditions, neither superior nor inferior, but simply alive. This practice also reveals resilience. The ego fears change, but non-self welcomes it, knowing that identity is fluid. Gratitude arises when you adapt to shifts without fear of losing yourself. Gratitude deepens when you see that resilience is not resistance, but openness, a willingness to let go of rigid identity and meet life as it comes. Realizing non-self also transforms love. Ego often makes love about possession, about declaring you are mine. But when you release self, love becomes freer, more expansive. Gratitude arises when you experience love without grasping, caring without controlling. Gratitude deepens when you see love as a gift of connection, not a property to defend. Even suffering is softened through non-self. Pain feels unbearable when tied to identity, when the mind insists, this is happening to me. But when the self is seen as fluid, suffering becomes part of the flow, not a fixed condemnation. Gratitude arises when you see that suffering too changes, that it does not define you. Gratitude deepens when compassion grows from this understanding, both for yourself and for others who suffer. Non-self also opens the door to wonder. Gratitude arises when you realize that without the burden of ego, the world shines more brightly. Gratitude deepens when you see that life itself is miraculous, that each moment is a gift, not belonging to you, but offered by existence itself. Living with gratitude for non-self does not erase individuality, it reveals true being. Gratitude arises when you see yourself not as isolated, but as part of a living whole. Gratitude deepens when you live lightly, humbly, and openly, aware that the boundaries of self are illusions, and that life is richer when those walls fall away. Seeing through the illusion of self dissolves the barriers that once kept you separate and heavy. Gratitude begins to flow more freely when you realize there is no permanent I to defend, no rigid ego to maintain, only a continuous stream of life moving through conditions. Yet even this insight does not arise on its own. It is the fruit of teachings passed down through centuries, preserved and shared so that countless seekers could awaken to truth. The Dharma is not just a set of ideas, but a timeless gift, a guiding light that shows the way to gratitude itself. To honor the Dharma is to bow to the wisdom that makes freedom possible, to recognize that without it, these realizations would remain hidden in darkness. The Dharma is precious because it points to reality as it is. The world is full of noise, opinions, and illusions, but the teachings cut through confusion and reveal clarity. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma is like a mirror, showing you life as it truly is rather than as you wish it to be. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this guidance spares you from wandering endlessly in ignorance, that it provides a path where otherwise there would be only uncertainty. The teachings are timeless because they speak not only to monks in ancient forests, but to every life in every era. Gratitude arises when you notice that the same wisdom that calmed the minds of seekers thousands of years ago can also soothe the restlessness of today. Gratitude deepens when you realize that truth does not expire, that impermanence, compassion, mindfulness and interdependence remain as relevant now as they were then. The Dharma also gives language to experiences you may feel but cannot name. Without it, awareness of impermanence, non-self, or compassion may appear vague or fleeting. The teachings crystallize these truths, turning them into practices that can be cultivated. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma offers not only insight but method. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that it provides tools you can actually use to transform your life, rather than leaving wisdom as abstract thought. The Dharma is also a gift, because it is freely given. Unlike treasures guarded for the few, the teachings have been shared across centuries without demand for ownership. Gratitude arises when you realize that this wisdom has been preserved, not for profit, but for the benefit of all beings. Gratitude deepens when you remember the countless generations of practitioners who safeguarded it, memorized it, lived it, and transmitted it so that you might receive it today. The teachings also serve as a compass in moments of confusion. Life presents choices, conflicts, and difficulties that easily overwhelm, yet the Dharma points toward compassion, patience, and clarity as guiding principle. Gratitude arises when you experience the relief of direction in times of chaos. Gratitude deepens when you realize that with the Dharma you never walk entirely blind, for you always have a light to guide you through uncertainty. The Dharma also humbles the mind. Gratitude arises when you realize that the wisdom you follow is larger than your individual opinions or preferences. Gratitude deepens when you allow the teachings to reshape you, to challenge your assumptions, and to expand your understanding beyond what your ego clings to. By surrendering to the Dharma, you grow not smaller, but freer. The teachings are also a refuge. In times of suffering, the Dharma offers solace by reminding you that pain is part of life, but not the entirety of it. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma does not deny suffering, but shows how to transform it into wisdom. Gratitude deepens when you find comfort in knowing that no matter the weight of hardship, the teachings provide a path to relief. The Dharma also teaches balance. In a world that swings between extremes of indulgence and denial, it offers the middle way. Gratitude arises when you discover the steadiness this brings, when you no longer feel pulled apart by opposing forces. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that balance is not mediocrity, but harmony, a way of walking with both freedom and responsibility. The teachings also nurture compassion. Gratitude arises when you see how the Dharma trains the heart to move beyond selfishness, to feel the suffering of others as your own. Gratitude deepens when you experience the joy of living with kindness, when you realize that compassion is not weakness, but strength, a strength born from wisdom rather than pride. The Dharma is also timeless because it adapts without losing its essence. Gratitude arises when you see that the teachings can be practiced in a temple, at home, at work, or in silence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the Dharma is not bound to culture or time period, that it bends to meet the needs of every seeker while remaining rooted in truth. The gift of the Dharma also lies in its universality. Though born in a particular place, its essence speaks to all humanity. Gratitude arises when you realize that its insights into impermanence, suffering, compassion, and wisdom are human truths, not limited to any one group. Gratitude deepens when you see how it creates bridges between people, dissolving divisions by pointing to the common ground of shared humanity. The Dharma also encourages direct experience. Unlike systems that demand blind belief, it invites you to see for yourself, to test the teachings in your own life. Gratitude arises when you realize that you are trusted with this responsibility, that you do not need to surrender reason, but to cultivate awareness. Gratitude deepens when the teachings prove themselves through lived experience, showing their truth not through authority, but through transformation. This guidance also protects from despair. In a world filled with conflict and suffering, it is easy to feel hopeless. The Dharma reminds you that suffering is not the end, but the doorway to awakening. Gratitude arises when you see that even pain carries meaning within this framework. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that no matter how heavy life feels, the Dharma keeps the path open to peace. The Dharma also teaches into being. Gratitude arises when you understand through its wisdom that you are never alone, that your life is woven into a fabric of causes and conditions. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this interconnectedness means every action matters, every choice has power, and every moment is alive with possibility. Honoring the Dharma also means honoring those who carried it before you. Gratitude arises when you consider the monks, nuns, teachers, and practitioners who preserved it through wars, famines, and exile. Gratitude deepens when you realize that their sacrifices ensure you can hear these teachings today. To practice the Dharma is to keep their gift alive, to become part of an unbroken chain of gratitude, stretching across centuries. The Dharma is a timeless gift because it not only reveals truth, but continually points you back to gratitude itself. Gratitude arises when you realize that every teaching, the impermanence of life, the freedom of non-self, the compassion of the Bodhisattva path, returns you to thankfulness for being alive. Gratitude deepens when you see that the Dharma is not separate from gratitude, but its foundation, its guide, and its expression. As this journey comes to a close, take a moment to feel the quiet truth running through all these teachings. Gratitude is not a single act, not a polite word, but a way of living. It begins with impermanence, the fleeting nature of all things. It deepens through suffering, where hardship becomes a teacher. Gratitude expands into being when you see how life is carried by countless unseen hands. It grows in mindful eating, in the simplicity of daily rhythms, in each breath, in silence, in encounters, and in letting go. Gratitude is in waking to a borrowed day, in serving others with joy, in contemplating death as a reminder of life's urgency, in honoring the past, in meeting the present with beginner's mind, in seeing beauty in the ordinary, in dissolving the illusion of self, in receiving the timeless Dharma, in bowing to teachers and ancestors, in cherishing community, in resting in the middle way, and in practicing gratitude as liberation itself. All of these threads weave together into one profound truth. Today is enough. This moment is enough. Gratitude is not waiting in the future. It is already here now, quietly asking you to notice. Before you drift into rest, I'd love to hear which part of these teachings touched your heart the most tonight. Leave a comment and share the lesson you are carrying with you. And if you'd like more guidance toward peace, clarity, and gratitude, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. That way, each new teaching will be here waiting for you, like an old friend returning to remind you of what truly matters. Sleep well with gratitude in your heart.